I would just share two high-level updates before I turn to my colleagues. Well, first, I want to welcome back Matt Dumlau. Matt serves the Lieutenant Governor as the Chief Policy Partner to the Lieutenant Governor on issues of all things environmental protection and ocean protection. And as we know on this council, membership alternates between the Lieutenant Governor and the Controller. So we're glad to welcome the Lieutenant Governor, you and back, Matt. Yep. And thanks so much, Kaitlyn, for joining instead of our legislative members. I should have mentioned Senator Allen and Assemblymember Addis are participating in floor votes this afternoon and are unable to join us today. So thank you both for joining in their stead. And I just want to enable you to introduce yourself because you've just arrived, and then that way you'll add yourself to the role.
Hi, everyone. Julie Crowfoot, Chief of Staff to Assemblymember Donna Addis.
Thanks so much, Julie. Appreciate you being here. And thanks to both legislative members for all that they do and their work on behalf of the state a couple blocks away today. So we obviously, since the beginning of the year, have been addressing the horrible fires in Los Angeles and all the impacts, providing assistance to those impacted by the fires and enabling the rebuilding and the recovery of those communities. There's obviously a component touching our work here at the Ocean Protection Council, given that the fires ran up all the way to the ocean. And as we'll talk about later today in the consent item, OPC has actually provided funding for water quality monitoring from the wildfires. So we at the Natural Resources Agency, and I know all of our partners across the state, remain focused like a laser on supporting the communities that have been impacted by these wildfires. And through the lens of OPC, we're really focused on enabling the restoration of environmental quality along that coast, not only in ensuing weeks, but really months and years as that rebuilding takes place. Obviously, since the beginning of the year, there's obviously been a change in federal administration as well. So we're actively monitoring changes that are happening almost in real time with the federal administration. We are concerned about the potential impact of certainly staffing changes and reductions of our federal partners. And just want to say our support goes out to all of our federal partners that have been doing this work for decades. And I want to emphasize how important that state-federal partnership is. So we'll be monitoring the situation around how decisions made in Washington, D.C. are actually impacting the protection of our ocean and coast in California. And we'll be taking whatever appropriate action to ensure that we don't lose protection of these valuable resources and this incredible place we call California, regardless of what decisions are made by the new administration. So more to come on that, no doubt, in coming months. With that said, let me turn it over to my colleagues if they want to share any announcements or comments at the top of the meeting. All right, then I will turn it over to our colleague, Kaitlyn Kalua. You know Kaitlyn serves as Deputy Director of the Ocean Protection Council and is filling in for our colleague Jenn Eckerle today, who typically serves as the Executive Director. So over to you, Kaitlyn.
All right, thank you, Chair Crowfoot. This is my mic check. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Kaitlyn Kalua, Deputy Director for the Ocean Protection Council, again, providing this afternoon's update on behalf of Jenn Eckerle, OPC's Executive Director, as well as CNRA's Deputy Secretary for Oceans and Coastal Policy. As Secretary Crowfoot already described, the tragic wildfires in Southern California have left a profound impact on our state. Given the unprecedented nature of these fires and the proximity of the burned areas to the coastline, OPC has worked closely with the state and local partners to provide emergency funding to the Southern California Coastal Water Research Project in partnership with the Los Angeles Regional Water Quality Control Board to support post-wildfire water quality monitoring. This has included post-wildfire sampling of over 200 locations across various habitats. That will also include supporting an ongoing region-wide network to monitor wildfire impacts on aquatic habitats, as well as produce a public-facing map of the various sites, the habitats, as well as the results of the separate sites and habitats that were tested. That is what is on our consent item 11 on today's agenda, augmentation for that data visualization as well as analysis. OPC is committed to supporting this work, and we're deeply grateful for the continued collaboration across local, state, and federal agencies to address ongoing post-fire issues such as beach closures, debris removal, ecosystem recovery and restoration, as well as water quality. Now for an update, more closer to home for OPC. Over this past January and February, OPC has held 6 in-person regional listening sessions related to updating our current strategic plan. So this would be for the 2026 to 2030 strategic plan. We've offered, again, these 6 in-person sessions across the state, ranging from Arcata down to Imperial Beach, as well as offering separate tribal roundtables, seeking public input, tribal priorities to inform the development of a forthcoming draft of the 2026-2030 strategic plan. So we are relatively early in the process. And I will say, from a personal note, this was not only invaluable for us to inform the draft of this plan, but certainly invaluable to see the meaningful partnerships of those who attended in person, were able to engage and build new partnerships on the local level. And so we're grateful to have completed that public input session. There was also a written form as a written public comment period available through February 21st, and we anticipate releasing the draft 2026-2030 strategic plan prior to the June council meeting for discussion. That will also be released for public, written public comment. So that'll be during the public written period that will also include a discussion. This quarter, OPC convened its Environmental Justice Advisory Board for California's coast and ocean. We met at the Tijuana River National Estuary Research Reserve, where OPC's 2026-2030 strategic planning process, as well as an upcoming biannual assessment of our inaugural 2022 equity plan were discussed. An equitable grant-making and partnerships roundtable was also held during this meeting with local San Diego partners. This included representatives from the August Research Group, Queer Surf, Coastal Defenders, and the City of Imperial Beach, where varied experiences and lessons learned were shared from their experiences of accessing public funds, how to strengthen partnerships, and how to support inclusive engagement in ocean conservation and coastal access. We're deeply grateful for the time of the Environmental Justice Advisory Board members, as well as these local partners, as we continue to strive to make public funding more accessible to under-resourced communities throughout the state. Another update for OPC related to 30 by 30, that is California's goal to conserve 30% of our coastal waters by 2030. At the end of last year, those in this room may recall we had an informational update on the 30 by 30 process, where OPC staff concluded an extensive public comment period, as well as tribal consultation on the draft decision-making framework for 30 by 30. OPC staff have continued to meaningfully integrate this feedback into a final decision-making framework. And while staff originally intended to bring a final decision-making framework today, we are continuing to have further consultation and engagement with local partners, tribes, state agencies, as well as the scientific community to inform a final framework and an updated evaluation of our state's progress in reaching that 30% goal. And we anticipate bringing both this evaluation and the final framework at the June meeting this year. Staff also anticipate releasing the $25 million request for proposals to advance 30 by 30 in coastal waters. That was approved by this council in this past December of 2024, following the adoption of the final framework in June to ensure it aligns with the final framework. A brief update now relating back to our consent items related to our science advisor, the Ocean Science Trust. Item 10 is being brought to this council for approval on consent. This would augment an existing science advisor agreement with the Ocean Science Trust to support the work of 2 expert working groups. The first related to restoration. It's a restoration working group to provide scientific guidance for restoration in coastal and marine habitats, with specific consideration of the impact of climate change and changing ocean conditions, such as temperature, on successful restoration efforts in the marine and coastal environment. This guidance will support both the state and on-the-ground practitioners in designing restoration projects, and critically could help serve as a tool for the state to set statewide restoration targets. Second, a working group to advance social science in managing California's marine protected areas, or MPA network. As described in the staff presentation during last September's council meeting, so again, continuity between these council meetings, This working group will directly support implementation of the recommendations of the 2023 Decadal Management Review for California's MPA network to better understand the effects of MPAs on California's coastal communities and support adaptive management while enhancing locally driven stewardship. Finally, I'll close on personnel, so thank you all for your time this afternoon. First, I'm thrilled to share that we recently hired Kyla Kelly as OPC's Water Quality Program Manager. We'll hear from Kyla later this afternoon, so thank you, Kyla. Kyla comes to OPC to lead our work to protect and improve coastal and marine water quality. She comes to OPC after completing a Knaus Fellowship through the Sea Grant Program at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, their Global Ocean Monitoring and Observing Program, with her Ph.D. in Marine Biology and Biological Oceanography from the University of Southern California, where she studied the impacts of climate change on harmful algal blooms in the California current system. We're absolutely thrilled to have Kyla join the team, so welcome, Kyla. Second, Abby Mohan was promoted to support OPC's offshore wind program as Senior Offshore Wind Program Manager after serving as OPC's 30 by 30 Program Manager since June of 2023. In this new role, Abby's work will involve leading the offshore wind, wave, and tidal energy program and is focused on developing a statewide science collaborative and monitoring research program for offshore wind specifically. Abby holds her bachelor's in geography as well as an MS, or master's in marine science from San Francisco State University. And she comes to us with an extensive, technical geospatial expertise, as well as broad strategic thinking that we are just absolutely delighted to have her lead this new program within OPC. So thank you, Abby, and welcome in this new role. And as Jen described in December's Executive Director's Report, we're happy to share that Olivia Wan and Hallie Brown have joined OPC this past January as California Sea Grant Fellows. Hallie has joined our biodiversity program, where she supports our efforts to advance 30 by 30, as well as implement our tribal engagement strategy. And Olivia Wan supports our climate change program, specifically the Senate Bill 1 Sea Level Rise Adaptation Planning Grant Program, as well as other efforts related to sea level rise. We're just grateful that both have jumped in with their feet first, essentially, and are already integral members of the team. So thank you both. We did have one departure this last quarter, as Ann Deep joined California Natural Resources Agency, so CNRA's Tribal Affairs Program, after serving as 30 by 30 Program Manager, also since June of 2023. It's very bittersweet to see Ann go, but we're delighted that Ann has not gone far and will continue to collaborate on our tribal engagement and the tribal affairs work. Lastly, a sincere gratitude and thank you to Michael Eckerle and Kyla Kelly, who are presenting today on items 4 and 5 on behalf of Dr. Justine Kimball. So thank you both for your work this afternoon. And with that, Chair Crowfoot, that concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks so much, Kaitlyn. And it's always remarkable to understand how much work happens in between these meetings. So a great update on progress, and welcome to the new staff. And I think we have the best team in the ocean protection business, but I think that's maybe a little subjective. All right, let's move on to then an update from our science advisor, Liz Whiteman, who of course serves as Executive Director of the Ocean Science Trust. Over to you, Liz.
I think we might have the best team. No, I'm kidding. We're jointly the best teams. Thank you, Chair Crowfoot, council members. I'm glad to be here today. I would actually like to start by taking this time and opportunity to express my appreciation and gratitude for the expertise, dedication, and partnership of so many in our science community that has been critical to the advancements and the projects that you'll hear about during today's agenda. I think it's particularly evident in the next agenda item, sharing OPC updates from 2024 and our collective progress on an ocean report card. From federal scientists to university colleagues, we are so appreciative of the time and expertise that so many have offered in the past months, enabling us to share these updates today. So thank you. I also wanted to recognize and lift a recent example of the importance of our work in California and the broader impact of our science policy partnership. So California's approach to sea level rise planning, as in the updated policy guidance developed by a science task force, OPC, and Ocean Science Trust, and adopted by the Council last June, included a cutting-edge approach to estimating vertical land motion. Sounds very wonky, but very localized differences in whether land is rising or sinking can have significant impacts on the amount of sea level rise that that community is projected to experience. And our collective desire to bring the best information to the table, to bring the best science to the table, motivated scientific advancements in observation and modeling by our NASA colleagues that we incorporated into that policy guidance last year. So last month, the methods and approaches used in the California guidance were published in a top-tier open access science journal, serving as validation of the scientific rigor behind what we all did, and also making this approach very broadly accessible for other jurisdictions. Indeed, our approach is today having a broader impact, as it is literally today being picked up and used in updating the sea level rise policy guidance for the state of New Jersey. And finally, I'm pleased to give just a little glimpse into a new initiative being launched this month by California Ocean Science Trust and Oregon Ocean Science Trust, the only two ocean science trusts in this country. Together, we are working to develop and implement a West Coast Ocean Science Action Agenda, aiming to look forward with one voice for the West Coast. This is a very forward-looking initiative, aspiring for a 5 to 10-year horizon in which aligned public and private investments are delivering the science needed to responsibly address the issues facing our coast and ocean. Our goal is to work in partnership with state, tribal, and federal governments to identify research and monitoring needs and priorities. But there are lots of lists of monitoring research needs. This is more than a list of questions and unknowns. We want to convene the science community and the constituencies of our West Coast states to build strategies and actions to identify the investments in infrastructure, assets, technology, and workforce so that the science sector can deliver on the priorities. We look forward to engaging closely with OPC, very much in alignment and support of the upcoming strategic plan, the 2026 to 2030 strategic plan, as we launch and advance this work, bringing the science community to bear on that. So look for an upcoming press release and feel free to reach out to engage with us in this effort. And with that, thank you.
Thank you very much, Liz. As always, appreciate all that the Ocean Science Trust is doing. So, and I want to just recognize Alexis Jackson, who came in a while ago, a little bit after roll call, so I want to make sure that she is reflected as attending today's meeting. So we're going to move to item 4, which is an informational item, and it's specifically an update on the annual report and our California Coast and Ocean Report Card. And for those who haven't been with us for years and years, the idea of a report card actually came to life, I think, in 2019, when many of us were new members of the council, and we were reflecting on how complicated ocean science can be. And we thought, boy, wouldn't it be a great thing to have for policymakers and members of the public to have a bit of a snapshot to identify how our ocean and coast are doing, sort of a health report, and identifying some of where things are going really well and where there are challenges that need to be addressed. Well, it's taken years because it is a complicated process to think about distilling that breadth and depth of complexity into something we can call a report card. So to provide an update on that, I think we have our colleagues Mike Eckerle and Jill Harris.
All right. Well, good afternoon, council members. Mike Eckerle, I lead OPC's biodiversity team as well as our tribal engagement, and I'm really excited to introduce item 4 today. I'll be turning it over momentarily to my colleague, Dr. Jill Harris from the Ocean Science Trust, but I'm going to start by taking us on kind of a whirlwind tour on everything that we did in 2024. So next slide, please. So just to ground us in our strategic plan here, target 3.6.1 under our biodiversity goal directed OPC to develop this State of the Coast and Ocean report starting in 2021. And also to develop by 2025, by the end of 2025, a report card reflecting what the Secretary just mentioned, really how is the ocean doing across many different dimensions of ocean health. And so this was really intended to be using kind of a scientific and indicator-based approach to grading. Next slide, please. So for that first report in 2021, we really kind of focused on a retrospective of everything that we had accomplished, which was great, but I think really when that landed, it became clear that this council and our public were really looking for more. They were really looking to understand, how is the ocean doing? And so in subsequent years, 2022 and 2023, we released reports that kind of integrated both. So it was an annual report reflecting OPC's accomplishments across all 4 goal areas of our strategic plan. But we also had some preliminary indicators in there, things like kelp canopy extent, sea level rise planning, across all 4 of those goal areas in our strategic plan to provide that snapshot. But importantly, we did not provide any kind of grades or scoring, just kind of more preliminary indicator development. Next slide, please. So this year, we're taking a bit of a different approach. So we are separating out that annual report component from this update on the development of the report card and a snapshot of indicators as they stand now in 2024. And I want to just once again call out our partnership with the Ocean Science Trust, with Dr. Harris in particular, to really help wrangle the scientific community to develop these indicators, look at all the different data sources, analyze that data, and develop these preliminary indicators and scores. And today, in addition to hearing from me about some of these major accomplishments we've made this year, you'll hear from Jill about kind of how that report card is shaping up. And this provides a cool opportunity, I think, for some public feedback on what the indicators are that we're looking at, on the general design of the report card, how accessible is it, how understandable is it, et cetera. So you'll hear more from her in just a second. Next slide, please. But for now, like I said, I'm going to just walk through very quickly some of our major accomplishments from this year under each of our 4 goal areas in our strategic plan. Goal 1 on climate change really focused this year on empowering local communities. So you heard Dr. Whiteman talking about that science update to our sea level rise policy, and she really drilled into kind of the scientific component of that plan, but also it's something that's intended to be taken up by local governments, by state agencies, by tribal governments to enable better local sea level rise planning. So that was something that happened this year. We also, and you'll hear more about this from Megan in just a few agenda items, awarded almost $15 million to 15 individual local projects through our Senate Bill 1 Sea Level Rise Preparedness Grant Program. So really exciting projects there. That included the launch of technical assistance specifically for Senate Bill 1 to help tribes and potentially disadvantaged communities, under-resourced entities be more competitive for that funding. Next slide, please. So goal 2, advancing equity. This remains a huge priority for OPC. This year we dispersed $1 million to support tribal nature-based solutions on California's coast as part of Governor Newsom's larger tribal nature-based solutions initiative. So we're really excited about 2 projects that we've funded, one on the North Coast, one on the Central Coast to support tribal land return planning, tribal workforce development. We also awarded another $1 million for our first ever environmental justice small grants program. And so this is supporting, 24 different local projects throughout the state, many of them community-based projects to further environmental justice. You also heard Kaitlyn talk about the Environmental Justice Advisory Board that was first convened this year. 7 individuals from really diverse backgrounds all across California that are, not just consulting with OPC, but other state agencies as well to advance environmental justice in coastal and marine management. Next slide, please. Biodiversity, very near and dear to my heart. This is a lot of what my team is working on. We finally released a draft decision-making framework that builds on Pathways to 30 by 30, specifically for coastal waters. So really drilling down into the specifics of how do we decide what counts and what doesn't for 30 by 30 in the ocean, and then what are our opportunities and pathways to achieving that 30% in the next few years. We've also supported monitoring and continued adaptive management of our state's marine protected area network. This includes supporting the Department of Fish and Wildlife in developing a transparent and objective and science-based process for evaluating petitions for MPA change that are before the Fish and Game Commission right now. We've continued to advance kelp forest restoration and research, mainly through 5 large-scale projects that we funded at the end of 2023. This is research, this is restoration, this is community engagement, many different facets of addressing the kelp crisis, but going to result in almost 30 acres of kelp being restored, which I know sounds like a small number, but given everything that has to go into restoring kelp, we're pretty excited about, and it's just the first step, right? We've awarded almost $2 million to help reduce whale entanglement in fishing gear. This, I think importantly, includes the development of a gear library for commercial fishermen to try out different kinds of potentially less harmful gear less likely to entangle whales. And finally, we've strengthened our international partnerships on biodiversity in part through our attendance at COP16 in Colombia, the UN Biodiversity Summit, where we came out strong in support of 30 by 30, many of these other issues that I've touched on. Also through our co-leadership of an international task force that's providing an important venue for knowledge exchange around 30 by 30 and other biodiversity issues. And one last thing on biodiversity, this year also saw the designation of the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary, which we're very excited about, the first tribally driven nomination of a national marine sanctuary in, I believe, US history, and certainly one of the biggest in California state waters, so very exciting there. Last slide, please. And then finally, on blue economy, a lot of our work this year focused on offshore wind. So offshore wind is, of course, a very big and overarching state initiative. OPC's piece of offshore wind so far has been really focusing on monitoring for the environmental impacts, potential environmental impacts of offshore wind on habitats and species. And one maybe a little bit weedy seeming, but very important tool that was developed this year was a new model to understand the potential impacts of offshore wind development on sensitive habitat in Humboldt Bay, which of course we know is going to be one of the areas that's impacted by infrastructure development for offshore wind. I'll also say on this that we've been tracking very closely with our partners at other agencies and in the commercial fishing communities, really significant impacts on commercial fisheries, including salmon and Dungeness crab, which experienced very severe impacts this year, and then also working with agency partners to make progress on a statewide aquaculture action plan. Next slide, please. So that's it from me. Like I said, whirlwind tour. It was a very busy 2024. Lots more work ahead in 2025 that we're excited about. But for now, I'll turn it over to Dr. Harris to present on the report card. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Welcome, Dr. Harris.
Hello, Mike, thanks for that introduction, for providing the context on the report card. Good afternoon, council members. My name is Jill Harris. I'm with the Ocean Science Trust, and I'm here today to give you an update on our progress and what we've accomplished in 2024, and give you an idea of our plan for the remainder of 2025 as we complete the first ever California Coast and Ocean report card. I know you've heard about the report card several times. I'm not going to spend a lot of time in an introduction, but I want to just remind everybody of our audience. We're developing this report card to be targeted towards decision makers, towards policymakers, and towards the public. So we're really balancing scientific integrity and accuracy with something that's easily understood at a high level to anybody who picks it up and glances at it. So to that end, next slide, please. One of our major accomplishments this year was soliciting public input. In the fall of 2024, we developed a web survey, which is still available today on the OPC website. We distributed this through the OPC listserv, through direct email to our contacts in the scientific community, and we held a series of public webinars. We received more than 40 individual responses from the scientific community, from small and large NGOs, and from the ocean and maritime industries. Next slide, please. Some of the major changes that we made as a result of this were that we added a commercial fisheries indicator. Previously, commercial fisheries was included in the ocean economy indicator, but it was sort of buried in there. We heard from a lot of people that it's really important and they wanted precise information on what was going on. So we pulled that out, made it its own indicator. We added a beaches indicator. This is separate from the pre-existing beach water quality indicator. This is about sandy beaches and dunes. We know that a lot of people in California, the way that they understand the ocean and relate to the ocean and value the ocean is through sandy beaches. And beaches are important for the economy and they're important ecosystems, so we gave them their own indicator. We revised the categories and the way the whole thing was organized. We got a lot of questions saying it was kind of confusing, so we reorganized things to clear things up and make it a little bit more straightforward. We also have been working really hard to make sure that this report card reflects the entire state. We heard from people all over the state saying, I want to make sure that my data and what's happening in my neck of the woods is reflected. So we're getting data and experts from the whole range of California's coastline. The other thing that we heard often from people were questions like, how often is it going to be updated and what are we going to do with this information? And we think that those questions really just emphasize how much people are paying attention, and they want to make sure that the report card reflects what they're seeing and is useful to their work. Next slide, please. So in addition to public input, we got input from the Ocean Protection Council Environmental Justice Advisory Board and tribal input. In 2024, we met twice with the Environmental Justice Advisory Board, and they provided feedback on both how we incorporate equity into the report card, and you'll see that in just a minute. They told us things like we should elevate equity to the front page, put it on par with the other indicators. They also gave us some great ideas for what that equity content could be, sources of data, things we could evaluate and score. The other really important role that they served was distributing the report card to their own professional networks, so we could really make sure that that survey and information about the report card is shared too, and we're receiving feedback from a broad swath of Californians. We've also been getting tribal input from government representatives and science staff at multiple points throughout the process. We have a couple of tribal staff who are participating in the expert working groups that are developing those individual indicators, and we're continuing to engage with both of these groups throughout the rest of the report card development process. Next slide, please. So the final point I want to make about what we did in 2024 is really just to emphasize that the report card is a huge collaborative effort. I'm not going to read all of the groups on this slide, but this just gives you a sense of who we're working with, who's contributing to this, who we're listening to statewide. The main point I want to make here is really just to express appreciation for all of the people, all of the scientists, and all of the groups that are supporting this process and contributing their time and expertise. One thing that's not mentioned on this slide is that we're also in early conversations about how to align the report card with existing data management platforms and workflows to make sure that we can have a good data management processes for the report card. Okay, so we took all of this information, all of this input from all of these groups, and developed this list of 13 indicators that will be on the 2025 report card. They were selected for their relevance, for their priority to decision-making and policy, and for available statewide data. You'll notice on the bottom right, we have these two other topics, ocean economy and equity, that are listed as cross-cutting topics. And these two areas, they're evaluated, and they're evaluated by groups of experts, just like the other indicators, but they're not scored as standalone indicators. And instead, that content is woven throughout the report card across the other indicators, and you'll see an example of that in just a moment. The other point I want to make here is that there are a couple of indicators that are not on this list that we know are important to understanding the state of the coasts and oceans, and we just simply don't have available good quality data for the whole state right now. So those are things like wetlands and marine debris and plastics that are sort of on the docket maybe for future report cards. Okay, so what does this look like in a report card? Next slide, please. Very excited to share with you today the first design concept of the California Coast and Ocean Report Card. I need to say up front, this is a demonstration only. The red, yellow, green dots you see here don't in any way reflect scores. They're just for design purposes to give you a sense of what it might look like. And also, can you click, please? So perfect, thanks. So this is the front page of the report card, and this arrow is highlighting where we're bringing in that equity content. It could be a quantitative description, an evaluation of distributional equity. It could be a sort of a qualitative explanation or a case study of how equity works in that indicator. Here we're showing it only in the communities category, but the equity content will be woven throughout the report card wherever it makes sense across indicators. So this is the front page, and then click, please. This is the back page of the report card where we list the stressors. I'll also mention that more information about each of these indicators is available in the meeting materials for today's agenda item. Things like how do we define the metric, where does the data come from, who are the experts involved in the calculation of the scores. So in addition to this report card, the front back that we're calling the report card, next slide please, we're also developing these two pagers for each of the indicators. So this is the front and back on this slide, and these two pagers show more in-depth information about each of the indicators. You get a status and a trend, you get a couple of key points. On the right side of the screen, which is the back page of the report card, you can dive deeper into the data. You get some of that geographic variation and some of the historical information and trends and what's driving those changes. In addition to these 2-pagers for each of the indicators, we're also developing a suite of supporting technical information, technical methods and data reports, data in online open data repositories, and some of the groups are even developing scientific journal articles about the process of developing these indicators. Okay, next slide, please. So to summarize it, what you'll see by the end of 2025 is that full report card, front page, each of the indicators, red, yellow, green dots. You'll see 2-pagers for each of the indicators. So a suite of 2-pagers and then supporting technical information along with that. Our immediate next step is to convene working groups. We have working groups running for 10 of the 15 topics, and the remaining 5 topics we've consulted with experts in the field. We just haven't yet established formal working groups. So we'll start on that right after this meeting today. And then the final point I want to leave you with is that we know we have a lot to do on a tight timeline. We're ready to do it, but today is a very important opportunity for your feedback, for public feedback, if there are any changes you want to see about the indicators, the approach, or the next steps. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Very exciting and wonderful, cogent presentation. I have some thoughts, and I imagine council members may as well. But before we do that, I want to ask if any members here or any members of the public here today have any public comment they want to provide, or if anyone joining by Zoom or phone would like to provide public comment.
We do have commenters in the queue. We'll start with Elizabeth Kahn. Elizabeth, you are unmuted and you have the floor.
Hi there. Thank you so much. My name is Elizabeth and I'm coming from Santa Monica. I'm a lifelong California resident. And I'm just want to say that I'm extremely grateful to live in a state that is prioritizing climate adaptation and even has an agency and a committee, such as the Ocean Protection Council. It was mentioned during the report card presentation, marine debris, and I'm extremely concerned about the debris from the Palisades fire in the Santa Monica Bay and potentially spreading to other parts of the California coastline. So I'm curious, generally, I know I was going to say this to the end, what the how the Ocean Protection Council and the CRNA at large, CNRA, sorry, is going to be addressing that, because it seems like there really isn't a plan so far. And also how that would factor into this report card, any type of monitoring of the urban fire toxic debris. So thank you.
Thank you very much, and we'll take all of the public comment and then we can reflect on it as staff or council as well. So we'll move on to the next public comment.
Next, we have Keith Rootsart. Keith, you have the floor.
Thank you. My name is Keith Rootsart. I'm with the Giant Kelp Restoration Project. And on this report card, there's a part about kelp and kelp canopy. And I just wanted to point out and make you aware that the Landsat resolution of the kelp canopy is very poor. Each pixel is 100 feet by 100 feet. And the Kelp Watch for the Central Coast, there's a 2022 report card. It says that the kelp is 94% of normal. But then the next year it says that it's in 2023, it's 20% of normal. But this report card draft says it's 40% of normal. And Monterey Bay Aquarium says it's 55 to 70% of normal. But the divers in the water, they are understanding that it's 90% of the biomass is lost. And I think the reason why we have this wildly inaccurate information is because the Department of Fish and Wildlife stopped high-resolution airplane infrared surveys in 2016. So we had better data, but we don't have it now. And this kelp loss compresses the sea otter habitat. The sea otters are in a very small area now trying to forage, and they are eating all the invertebrates out of these areas. There's these areas of the near the coast that are just dead zones. There's just nothing really alive in there but like sponges and things like that. And it's really not in the report card here. And this, I think, is a problem because we stopped looking at the sea otter census in 2019. This is responsibility of the U.S. Geological Survey, and there was less than 3,000 and declining in 2019, and we really don't know how many remain. And this is, I think, an existential crisis for the sea otters. So thank you.
Thank you.
Speaker is Chris Voss. Chris, you have the floor.
Thank you, council members, Secretary Crowfoot. My name is Chris Voss, and I'm the president of the Commercial Fishermen of Santa Barbara. And I want to start by thanking the OPC and the council for having included a commercial fisheries indicator. I think that is really a very smart thing to do. In the case of what we face with respect to the federal agencies having trouble performing their functions in relationship to data collection around fisheries management, I believe we shouldn't be too aggressive and precautionary, because I've seen this happen in the past where when budgets are cut and people are laid off, a wildly conservative approach is adopted that is designed to protect the resources in the absence of adequate information. But I would encourage the state to step up to the challenge of pursuing creative and cost-effective ways to continue to collect the essential information we need to make good fisheries management decisions, both at the state and the federal level. So I'm just suggesting this in anticipation of what may happen in the near future in relationship to the federal, the Fed's ability to collect the essential information they need. So thank you for this opportunity to comment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was the final online public commenter.
Thank you very much. I'd turn it over to council members for any thoughts or input on the report card and/or annual report. Over to you, Matt.
Well, first of all, just wanted to thank staff for an incredibly thorough review of everything from last year. Having not been on the council last year, it was nice to get that review. And also on the report card, there's an incredible amount of information that goes into that, and it's really, really hard to synthesize it into something with a color system or, you know, general comments that stretch across broad areas of the state. So it is very difficult, but it's also very useful for the public. So it's a great thing that we've been working on, and I'm really proud to see how far we've come with it. Just a couple kind of minor comments. I think, looking at the draft, perhaps avoiding acronyms would be useful. I think we all are very aware of HAB and OA and SLR in the spaces that we occupy, but the broader public may not know what some of those things are. So little things like that could be helpful. And then I think, you guys have the QR codes or, a spot for QR codes, which is great, because I think being able to connect the public to the back end of everything, to really see where the data is coming from, really get, all the nuances and caveats and things that go into those scientific studies that are underpinning the report card will be very useful for certain members of the public who are very curious about where everything came from. But all in all, love it. I think it's a great tool, and it will be very helpful for, taking these really complicated things and boiling it down to sort of a general sense of how are we doing as a state in these particular areas. So thank you very much, staff. Great work.
Thank you for those comments. Any others? Alexis.
Yeah, just want to echo the congratulations, I think, to the staff and everyone who's touched the OPC annual report and also the report card. These are like beasts of efforts, and I think it's also kind of points to the example and the importance of collaboration. When it's done at its best, it brings together a lot of stakeholders. They react to public feedback, and they come back with important iterations. I think it's a challenge when you're trying to synthesize information into a single indicator. I think even nominally for feedback like, beaches or fisheries alone, it's hard to even understand or get a sense of what those indicators mean. So thinking about like how nominally there can maybe be some clarity. And then also really great to just see how public comments were incorporated on providing some of that sub-regional context, because we know that there are major differences across the state, and it will be easier to, start to go into action with greater resolution on what's happening versus just a single point. So I thought that was a step in the right direction. The one question that I did have, and actually Chris Voss kind of intimated at it in his comment, is around what do we do when information is missing? I think that could be a major challenge, not just for the fisheries indicator, but across all of them. Recognizing that there are some major funding shifts that will be impacting some of the research data sets that inform these indicators, and knowing, how these indicators are rolling averages or like annual, those details matter. I think especially if we're going to hand this to decision makers to move from. So just wondering if there was any thinking there.
Great question. Thanks for your comments. The missing data one is a struggle. Some of the ways we've dealt with that are like for wetlands, we just don't include it, which is it's not a great solution. The fish data is interesting. There are something like, someone here is going to know the answer, 600 or 800 species of marine fishes in California. And we don't have population data. This is not a fisheries, it's the fish indicator, but we just don't have population data on most of those. So we've had really interesting discussions with the fish group about like, how can you possibly score all marine fishes if we only have data on, 10% of the species that live here. So I think one of the approaches that some of the groups are talking about is to recognize those data gaps and make sort of like a data wish list that goes along with that. This is information that if we had it would help us score the data better and make better decisions. So I think that's sort of the approach we're taking now, of just acknowledging where we're missing data and doing the best we can with what we have.
And just to respond, Alexis, I think you raise a really important point about the loss of federal data. We're gravely concerned that there are now scientific data sets that are disappearing from federal websites in real time, and concerned about the ongoing changes, including staffing cuts that may mean that a lot of the data, for example, as brought up in public comment, data that informs federal fisheries management is all of a sudden gone. So one request I'd make of our executive director would be at our next meeting to consider providing an informational update about changes to federal data that we are experiencing, and a discussion about how we could supplant or how we would supplant or address that loss of data. So thank you for that, Alexis. I have a few high-level comments. The first is thank you. This is, I think, a really important effort, as I've maintained for several years, and the progress is impressive. From my perspective, you're very much in the ballpark, at least with this council member's vision of what we would be able to accomplish. At the end of the day, we know Californians care about the coast and ocean passionately, but to me, there's been a disconnect between that level of passionate support from your non-expert and then a real understanding of the challenges that the ocean and coast face. So to me, this is a big dot connector. And I know distilling complex information is no doubt challenging and somewhat stressful for scientists that live in that complexity. But I just want to encourage you to maintain that level of distillation. Red, yellow, green, I think mean something to non-experts like me, and so I appreciate that. I do think where there are categories that are important, but one can't make the final determination of a code or a grade, I think rather than not include it, maybe consider it as an incomplete grade. Because I think it would be important for Californians to know that we prioritize debris, marine debris, including plastics, as well as wetland restoration, given the role of wetlands filtering out water quality into the coast. But I think it's also important to know that we simply may not have the data to provide that grade. I think fundamentally this is both a document that can inform, and it's a way that we can communicate. So I'm hoping that while there's this focused level of sort of scientific expertise, the last treatment can really be a treatment for public communication. So we can understand, how do we launch it? Maybe there are policymaker briefings for staff of our legislature. Maybe we're doing, a couple of public launches. Maybe it includes, video so we can launch this over the TV. Maybe there's a spotlight on a person in each of those areas that's doing this work to kind of personalize it or make them a resource. So maybe this lives on a website at OPC or somewhere that that we can link to via a QR code. You're probably already thinking about that. So both an education tool, but also just a general awareness tool, and then laying on that communication. And then lastly, I think I would just emphasize, I'm confident that there's a scientific integrity behind this, just given how much OST and the OPC have focused on this and the deliberative nature of that. And I just say, let's continue to avoid making the perfect the enemy of the good in terms of getting this first document out. I think ultimately this is going to be quite helpful towards building a stronger movement to protect our oceans and coasts. So really excited to help launch it by the end of the year. Good. Yes, Katie.
First, just really want to acknowledge all of the work that was done by OPC staff over the last year. The annual reports really highlights just the breadth of everything that's being done. So thank you for that. With the report cards, I want to echo what other council members have said of really just how large of a project this is that you guys are taking on. And I have done report card development for water quality. It is a beast, and I just appreciate it. With just the design, really like how it is laid out with trying to give some of those summary overall stats, but also trying to give some of the geographical differences, particularly with the examples that you showed today, along with sort of the red, yellow, green indicators as well, super helpful. I would just, think about how that could be made more accessible for folks. Can we use arrows in conjunction with that color scheme or something? But overall, it looks really great start. Really look forward to the updates as we're working through the rest of the year. And maybe just for people listening, could you reiterate when there would be an opportunity for public engagement throughout the rest of the development as well?
Yeah, thank you for the comment about the red, yellow, green. It's intuitive for those of us who can see those colors, and if you can't see those colors, it's like gray circles. So yes, that is something that we need to figure out and improve, so thank you for that. The feedback survey, the web survey, is available right now on the Ocean Protection Council website. It's open, and I get notifications when someone responds to it, so anyone can comment there. And I think also my email is on that website, so available for direct email if people want to reach out and engage with OST on this.
Thank you so much. Very excited about the progress there. We're next going to move on to item 5, which is our first action item of the meeting, and it is to consider and potentially approve disbursement of funding for Senate Bill 1, the Sea Level Rise Adaptation Planning Grant Program. And we welcome our colleague Megan Williams, who leads our coastal resilience work as the OPC's Coastal Resilience Program Manager. Welcome, Megan.
Good afternoon, council members. Hopefully you can hear me. My name is Megan Williams. I am the Coastal Resilience Program Manager at OPC, and as Chair Crowfoot just said, I'm presenting the next set of SB1 projects recommended for funding approval, as well as providing an update on an upcoming tribal-focused sea level rise adaptation funding opportunity. Next slide, please. In August of 2023, OPC approved the disbursement of up to $95.9 million for the SB1 grant program, which funds sea level rise adaptation planning and implementation projects. The purpose of this program is to develop consistent sea level rise adaptation plans and projects to build resilience to sea level rise statewide, ensuring that local, regional, and tribal governments have the resources they need to prepare for rising seas. Since launching, OPC has funded 15 projects totaling $14.7 million. Of these 15 projects, 7 are in the San Francisco Bay Area and 8 are along the outer coast. The majority of the awarded grants support are under our Track 1, which supports sea level rise adaptation planning across the state, from San Diego to Del Norte County. 2 advanced urgent adaptation projects to help prepare the coast for impacts of sea level rise. These projects reflect the diverse set of adaptation challenges statewide, from community-driven planning to infrastructure protection. However, adaptation planning is not a one-size-fits-all approach. The SB1 grant program is structured to support localized planning efforts while ensuring that local plans are consistent, comprehensive, and aligned with the sea level rise adaptation criteria. At the same time, flexibility within the program allows local and regional governments to propose projects that reflect their unique challenges and community needs. Whether a project is led by a coastal city, a regional special district, or a tribal government, SB1 ensures planning efforts align with principle number 4 of OPC's Principles for Aligned State Action, which is to support local leadership and address local conditions. Now that we are well into the grant execution phase for many of these 2024 funded projects and continuing to review new proposals, a key focus has emerged for us, which is ensuring that project areas and partnerships are appropriately scoped. Since SB1 is meant to support land use planning, there's an expectation that the project areas align with jurisdictions where the lead applicant has legal purview or there are partnerships in place to ensure that adaptation planning can be implemented effectively. Because adaptation planning often involves overlapping jurisdictions and considerations, we're also evaluating how each project aligns with other entities that may have a role in land use planning or resource management. This multi-jurisdictional consideration plays out in different ways. For example, in the Bay Area, in alignment with BCDC's newly adopted Regional Shoreline Adaptation Plan guidelines, we are encouraging projects that integrate across county and city lines, recognizing the interconnectedness of shorelines, infrastructure, and adaptation strategies. On the outer coast, we've seen projects expand their scope to ensure the right partners are involved. This is why, for example, we are bringing forward an augmentation to Stinson Beach's project today, which I'll discuss in a few slides. And for tribes, this approach is also critical. Tribal adaptation planning should be led by tribes, but because cultural sites often overlap with local and regional jurisdictions, coordination with coastal planners is essential. With this framework in mind, let's talk about the winter application review process that led to today's recommended projects. Next slide, please. For this round, we received 7 new proposals totaling $7.8 million in requested funding, along with 1 budget augmentation request for an existing project and 1 project that was deferred from our December council meeting. Each proposal was reviewed for completeness and eligibility and then underwent a technical review by OPC staff in collaboration with either the Coastal Commission or BCDC, depending on the project area. Proposals were assessed for their adherence to the sea level rise adaptation criteria and the evaluation criteria set forth within the SB1 solicitation. Collaboration with the Coastal Commission or BCDC ensures that SB1 projects contribute to the requirements set forth in Senate Bill 272 and also align with either the Coastal Act or the McAteer-Petrus Act. This round of review led to 4 projects that were requested to resubmit with incorporation of detailed reviewer feedback, 1 project that withdrew due to securing funding elsewhere, and 1 project requested to resubmit under Track 2 once it opens. Next slide, please. This led to 3 projects rising to the top for recommendation today, each exemplifying the regional multi-jurisdictional focus I just emphasized. Fairfield-Sassoon Sewer District seeks funding to complete a multi-jurisdictional Solano Bayshore Resiliency Project, bringing together Solano County and the cities of Vallejo, Fairfield, Sassoon City, and Benicia to develop a sub-regional shoreline adaptation plan. The project includes a vulnerability assessment, community visioning, and adaptation strategy development, ensuring that local adaptation planning is coordinated at a regional scale. Stinson Beach County Water District is requesting a budget augmentation for their sector-specific project that was originally approved by OPC in June of 2024. Initially scoped for Stinson Beach, this augmentation will expand to include the neighboring community of Bolinas, recognizing their shared coastal wastewater vulnerabilities. Both communities rely on outdated, high-risk systems affected by high groundwater, storms, and saltwater intrusion. Expanding the scope ensures a regional approach and prevents unintended downstream or cross-jurisdictional impacts. Next slide, please. The final project recommended for funding today is the Santa Ynez Band of Chumash Indians Chumash Coastal Hazard Assessment Project. This project takes a regional approach to protecting tribal cultural resources, working across multiple counties and engaging all 8 Chumash bands. It will conduct vulnerability assessments of Chumash heritage sites at risk from sea level rise and enhance the tribe's ability to engage in local and regional adaptation planning, ensuring cultural sites are considered in land use decisions. The project is backed by Santa Barbara County leadership and other state and federal representatives, reinforcing its alignment with regional planning efforts. Most critically, it fills a gap by ensuring that tribal cultural heritage is incorporated into broader coastal resilience planning in the area. We do recognize that this project is not a traditional fit under our SB1 Track 1, but we believe it merits funding because of its direct contributions to pre-planning, community visioning, and vulnerability assessments along the coast. One of the project's core tasks is to enhance the tribe's ability to organize cultural and environmental data to support consultation and integration into local and state planning efforts. This ensures that Indigenous perspectives are included in regional resilience strategies. Recognizing that this project didn't fit neatly into our existing framework, however, it did help drive the development of a new funding opportunity, one that will allow tribes to lead their own sea level rise planning efforts. Next slide, please. So building on this need, OPC is developing a dedicated funding opportunity for tribally led adaptation planning. This initiative is designed to empower California Native American tribes to lead and inform culturally appropriate planning efforts while strengthening engagement with local and regional jurisdictions. It will provide funding for tribes to be able to assess risks to sacred lands, burial grounds, and other cultural sites, ensuring that these critical places are considered in broader adaptation strategies. A key focus of this funding opportunity is ensuring that tribes can engage in coastal planning while safeguarding culturally sensitive information. By leading these efforts, tribes can determine how best to organize and share data with local coastal planners in a way that protects their cultural resources while respecting their governance structure and priorities. Importantly, OPC is conducting tribal consultation shortly before releasing this solicitation to ensure it reflects tribal needs and priorities. This funding opportunity builds on projects like the Chumash assessment and will help tribes secure funding to assess and plan for sea level rise impacts on culturally significant sites, ensuring coastal resilience strategies incorporate tribal priorities. OPC anticipates releasing this solicitation in mid-2025. Next slide, please. So with that, the recommendation is for just under $2.8 million to the Fairfield-Sassoon Sewer District, Stinson Beach County Water District, and Santa Ynez Band of Chumash Indians to complete sea level rise adaptation planning projects under our Track 1. This action advances Objective 1.1 of our strategic plan. And next slide, please. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks so much, Megan. Before we take any questions or comments from the council, let's move to public comment. And invite anybody in the room, if you're interested in providing public comment, you can just come up to the podium and we'll turn to our colleagues managing the virtual engagement.
There are currently no public commenters online.
Okay. We have a public commenter here in person. Welcome.
Hey everybody, this is Carla Garcia with the Monterey Bay Aquarium. I just had a question about the new program that you just announced. I was wondering if federally and non-federally recognized tribes would be eligible or how, just so that we can spread the word about this. Yeah.
Excellent. I think that's the totality of our public comment. So I would just reiterate the question to Megan around what tribal communities or governments are eligible if you've begun to answer that question.
Yes, that is a great question, and I should have clarified it, so thank you for asking that. This new funding opportunity is exciting because it does expand the opportunity for funding to non-federally recognized tribes as well. So currently under SB1, as it stands right now, it is really limited to federally recognized tribes under this like traditional Track 1. But this opportunity will allow non-federally recognized tribes to apply as well and lead their own planning efforts for sea level rise along the coast.
Thank you so much. I would just observe and thank our legislature for the passage of Senate Bill 1 that really attempts to anticipate all of the changes that we're already starting to experience as a result of sea level rise. I think for a lot of us, really the last decade has been the reality that sea level rise planning is not a future planning exercise. It's really something that has to happen quickly. If we look at storm impacts, for example, or coastal erosion that's currently disabled one of our most popular rail lines between Los Angeles and San Diego, we know these impacts are happening right now. So SB1 is really important toward helping local communities plan for these changes. And then this funding program is, to me, essential, providing the support for them to be able to do so. So I'm definitely supportive of moving these funding items forward. But before I entertain a motion, are there any other comments from council members? Okay, could I ask for a motion on the approval of disbursement of funds?
Make a motion to approve dispersing up to $2,792,000 to various grantees who submitted successful applications to the SB1 Sea Level Rise Adaptation Planning Grant Program for sea level rise adaptation planning or implementation projects.
Excellent.
Second.
Excellent. So Katie moves and Matt seconds to adopt the proposed findings for all projects as recommended by staff. Can we call the roll?
Chair Crowfoot,
Yes.
Katie Landau,
Yes?
Matthew Dumlau,
Yes.
Alexis Jackson,
Yes.
Megan Rocha. Megan, can you try one more time, please?
Yes, I said yes. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes, indeed, we can. Thanks, Megan. Thanks for your patience, sticking with us and participating as a council member through Zoom. So the motion passes. Thank you so much, Megan.
Thank you.
Our next item, agenda item 6, is another action item, and it's for the consideration and adoption of a resolution regarding ocean acidification and hypoxia, which, as a non-scientist, I understand to mean the loss of oxygen in the water. This has been an ongoing priority to better understand the threats of ocean acidification and hypoxia and what the state can do about them. And I should mention that it connects with our strategic plan objective 1.2, which is minimizing the causes and impacts of ocean acidification and hypoxia. And we are grateful here to have Kaitlyn join us. And I'm sorry, Kaitlyn, I don't have in my notes your last name.
Kelly.
Kelly. Thank you very much for joining us, and I welcome your presentation.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair and Council members. I'm Kaitlyn Kelly. I'm the Water Quality Program Manager here at OPC. Next slide, please. I'm presenting the resolution on ocean acidification and hypoxia in support of, next slide, actually. In support of Strategic Plan Goal 1, Objective 1.2, minimize causes and impacts of ocean acidification and hypoxia, and targets to achieve that objective, including establishing water quality objectives for ocean acidification and hypoxia based on the latest scientific research. Next slide, please. Ocean acidification is the decrease in ocean pH, and hypoxia is the decrease in ocean oxygen, together referred to as OAH. Both are affected by natural processes and anthropogenic impacts. While this is happening across the global ocean, California is particularly vulnerable to OAH because the California Current is an upwelling system, which has a natural effect on lowering pH and oxygen along our coast. We also have anthropogenic stressors, primarily from carbon dioxide emissions, and we are investigating the impact of land-based nutrients and sources like wastewater outfalls and runoff. We care about OAH because the California Current system is a biologically productive system, and OAH is a threat to species viability with the potential to impact trophic level dynamics, which has implications for biodiversity and fisheries that are economically important. Next slide, please. California and OPC have long recognized OAH as a problem and a growing threat for California, and therefore have implemented many working groups, bills, investments, monitoring, research, and other strategic actions towards tackling this problem. Next slide, please. And over the last few years, OPC has invested in a suite of projects that are still ongoing, including the addition of biological measurements to our chemical monitoring programs, the development of a centralized user-friendly OAH data portal, tools and experiments to better understand biological sensitivities, as well as species-specific studies, including rockfish adaptation potential. Results from these ongoing projects are expected over the next 1 to 2 years. Next slide, please. OPC's longest, by which I mean over a decade, and biggest single investment in OAH is the development of a coupled physical biogeochemical OAH model for the entire West Coast to help managers better predict and understand the implications of OAH for marine resource management, and determine to what extent local nutrient inputs exacerbate acidified and hypoxic conditions. The project has been co-funded by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, and represents a scientific collaboration with UCLA, the Southern California Coastal Water Research Project Authority, or SWRP, and Princeton University, among multiple research institutions and over 20 scientists. Investments and findings from this model have been presented at the Council numerous occasions in the past, most recently at the February 2024 meeting. The model is now considered a state-of-the-art global example of coupled physical biogeochemical OAH models and has resulted in numerous peer-reviewed science publications, including 3 recent publications that articulated key model findings this past fall, which I will detail in the next few slides. Last month, an independent technical review panel additionally found that this model is ready to address basic management questions about whether nutrient loads from treated wastewater discharges in the Southern California Bight have impacted the marine environment. Next slide, please. So far, the model has been used to answer some fundamental questions about OAH in the Bight, including what is the effect of anthropogenic nutrients on algal blooms, oxygen, and pH? What are the biological effects of these changes? And what are the effects on nitrogen management alone or in combination with potable water recycling? Next slide, please. Model results published in the last few years have shown that in the Bight, anthropogenic nutrients are significantly impacting OAH. These nutrient inputs have led to a 40% increase in algal production along the coast and a 40% Bight-wide and a 50% increase along the coast, which you can see in this figure on the right. Ultimately, this causes a significant pH and oxygen declines for 4 to 6 months every year, every summer. Translating these changes in OAH to biological impacts, the model has shown, next slide, please. The model has shown that these OAH changes are predicted to decrease the amount of habitat available for key pelagic taxa, specifically the northern anchovy and pteropods. I'm sorry, can we move to the next slide?
Yeah, next slide. There it is.
Okay. So these key pelagic taxa are the northern anchovy and pteropods, and this habitat availability decreases for 3 months in late summer in over a quarter of the Bight, including a recurring area of habitat compression near Catalina Island, shown here. Next slide, please. The model has been used to investigate management actions, including nutrient reduction and potable water recycling, which reduces outfall volume. Those 12 scenarios can be seen here in this figure. Importantly, the model has shown that reducing nutrient release from outfalls can reduce the negative impacts on seawater chemistry and biological habitat availability, meaning that these negative impacts have the potential to be significantly reduced. Next slide, please. The model is currently being used to pursue additional questions that will provide context and refine results to date, including how future climate change might interact with anthropogenic nutrient outputs to impact seawater chemistry and biology, to better quantify the US-Mexico cross-border nutrient inputs, and to expand the model to other important regions like the San Francisco and Monterey coast, which is heavily influenced by riverine input from agriculturally dominated watersheds. Next slide, please. With that overview of recent research and model findings, I'll share OPC's proposed ongoing commitments to outline in today's resolution, given the potential for large irreversible effects on California's coast and ocean caused by OAH. I wanted to note that the following actions pertain to OPC and reflect existing ongoing work to address OAH. While they're not necessarily new, this resolution is an opportunity for OPC to elevate and consolidate ongoing priorities. First, OPC resolves to invest in and advance monitoring and research. This involves continuing some of the work I just described to better understand the causes and impacts of OAH, identify what pollutants contribute to OAH, and strengthen monitoring statewide to improve our knowledge and inform nutrient management. Next slide, please. OPC also resolves to support the development of one or more water quality objectives and a program of implementation by the State Water Resources Controlled Board, consistent with their existing strategic work plans. OPC supports and encourages a program of implementation that addresses the anthropogenic causes of OAH within the Water Board's regulatory authority, including nutrient management actions as appropriate, and considers water recycling needs and energy demands. Next slide, please. Next, OPC resolves to advance and inform nutrient management approaches. In this process, information sharing is essential as major POTWs are actively evaluating infrastructure upgrades, and we recognize that each facility or region may require unique design and technological considerations. So our approach to this will be to encourage collaboration and early information sharing among state agencies and between external partners to inform and support improved management of land-based nutrients. We will also encourage state agency partners to carefully invest public funds and prioritize nutrient management in publicly owned treatment works, other specified land-based sources of nutrients in state programs. Next slide, please. Lastly, OPC resolves to seek opportunities to advance multi-benefit infrastructure upgrades for water recycling. Again, we will support a collaborative approach to leverage and identify funding opportunities. These upgrades should be feasible, adhere with water quality objectives, and advance OAH nutrient remediation efforts. Infrastructure upgrades can provide co-benefits in support of other state water quality and water supply priorities through the recycling infrastructure that incorporates appropriate nutrient management. Next slide, please. With that, OPC recommends the adoption of the proposed resolution on ocean acidification and hypoxia. Next slide, please. And thank you for listening and considering the recommendation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Kyla. Great presentation. Let's move to public comment. I'd first invite anyone here in person, if you want to approach the podium to provide public comment, we would invite you to do so. Yes, please. Oh, first, thank you. I want to just, so sorry to ask you to stand up. I want to ask our colleague Phil Crater from the Water Board. Typically, we'd ask any partner agencies to share any comments first. So welcome, Phil.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Good afternoon, Chair Crowfoot, council members. Thank you all for your time and attention today. I'm Phil Crater with the State Water Resources Control Board, Division of Water Quality. And I'm here today to both thank you and also express support for the resolution. So first, a big thank you to you and your staff for the collaboration. We've enjoyed a great working relationship with you. It was evident here as well, and just always appreciate the opportunity to partner with you on these efforts. I want to also express support for the resolution. Research indicates that the West Coast is going to be facing the earliest and the most severe changes in ocean chemistry. And while global emissions are a dominant cause, we know that actions can be taken locally to improve these local drivers. The resolution recognizes the substantial progress on ocean acidification and hypoxia models, as well as the State Water Board's goals to develop standards and implementation programs to address the impacts of ocean acidification and hypoxia and to advance nutrient management. Notably, the OPC provided funding to support the Southern California Coastal Water Research Project's development of a coupled, these are big words, physical biogeochemical model, or the ROMSBEC, that's been designed to predict how land-based coastal discharges are influencing ocean water quality, including the trajectory of ocean acidification and hypoxia in coastal waters. Also, a panel of experts recently completed an independent review of the state-of-the-art modeling tool and concluded that it is based on sound science and it is ready to be used to investigate the influence of treated wastewater discharges on ocean acidification and coastal ecological health in the Southern California Bight. The Water Board acknowledges that the development of a nutrient standard may take some time to develop. However, we are actively working to find strategies to reduce nutrient inputs to our waters now. Advancements in ocean acidification research and the deliverables from the ROMSBEC model will be critical in reducing pollutant impairments in the Southern California Bight and will allow us to look further into other regions of California coastline to ensure that the protection of beneficial use, or to ensure the protection of beneficial uses of ocean waters. So we appreciate the OPC's continued dedication to this important issue, including the following actions identified in the resolution. investing in and advancing monitoring and research, supporting the development of water quality objectives and a program of implementation, advancing nutrient management, and seeking opportunities to advance multi-benefit infrastructure upgrades for water recycling. That concludes my comments today. Support the resolution, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and I really appreciate you and your staff's time and effort.
Thanks so much, Phil. I anticipate I may have a question or two for you after public comment.
Sure thing.
Thank you. Let's move to public comment. I saw a couple gentlemen stand up in the back, so why don't you come on down? Welcome.
Good morning, council members, or good afternoon. Jared Voskel on behalf of the California Association of Sanitation Agencies. CASA represents over 135 wastewater agencies across the state that engage in the collection, treatment, recycling, and resource recovery of wastewater. We want to thank the OPC for your leadership in protecting the coast from climate change and specifically CO2 emissions. We're here in support of the resolution today. They say the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, and the second best time is today. I feel like this action that the OPC is taking is really in line with their work to date, and we appreciate the elevation of the collaboration with stakeholders on this initiative. The first resolution in there mentions investing in monitoring and research, and we're very supportive of this. On the monitoring side, you have very modeling tools that make predictions. You also have empirical data to couple with that to validate those predictions. You've heard a little discussion about aragonite saturation. You need 14 days of data to confirm you have that condition to induce that biological effect. We don't have that data yet, but we're working towards figuring out how can we get to something like that. So that need for investment in monitoring is very important. Likewise on research, the independent review panel had 40 recommendations all about ways to increase the models, confidence in the findings, and I won't go more than 3 minutes, but if I could have just like a little extra time, that'd be great. The full quote in the report about the model, it said the robust building blocks and careful configuration of the ROMSPEC modeling system enable it to successfully capture fundamental physical and biogeochemical impacts induced by treated wastewater discharges to the bite. However, there are uncertainties associated with the model's parameters, and their impacts should be considered when using modeling scenarios for management-related decisions related to specific subregions or specific components of the ecosystem. And so we think with this ongoing work, we're going to narrow in on that aspect of the research, but in terms of the OPC's evaluation of where to invest, we encourage the continued participation in the independent review panel process. Dr. Weisberg from SCORP is here, Phil Crater from the OPC here, Justine Kimball also have all been involved in this, and they're plowing forward to make progress in getting consensus on this model. For us, in terms of uncertainty analysis, the axiom is the level of certainty required, it has to be commensurate with the cost of compliance. And so when we're talking about ocean acidification, there's 20 agencies in Southern California. They contribute less than 1% of the total nitrogen to the Southern California bite. For them to do nutrient upgrades, that would be about $3 billion. And so we're very sensitive to affordability issues. We have a forthcoming report next month that will provide a greater overview of all this work we've engaged in to try to highlight, and that work will go in to supplement some of the loadings and numbers and the modeling work that'll go on. And finally, I just want to have to say, if there's any talk about dead zones are found at the mouth of the Mississippi River because of ag runoff. There are not dead zones in the ocean on account of POTWs. It's a larger phenomenon, but we're very sensitive to anyone conflating a model's prediction with an assertion there's a dead zone in the environment, because our member agencies strive to protect the environment. And so with that, respectfully, I appreciate the extra time and in support of this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Secretary Crowfoot and Council. Thanks for the opportunity to comment today. My name is Steve Jepson. I'm the Executive Director for Clean Water SoCal. We represent 80 water, wastewater agencies in Southern California. And I gotta say, side note, love the ocean report card format. I think that's gonna be great. We're certainly in support of advanced monitoring and research. There are elements of the presentation and the resolution that are a little bit challenging for us. When contemplating wastewater-related policy, we really urge close coordination and understanding of wastewater discharges and accurate science so that we can make informed decisions. There are some discussion about the readiness of the model. It should be noted in the 2024 third-party review, there were 40 recommendations of model enhancements that need to be completed before it can be used for managerial decisions. The wastewater sector has capital plans that go out 10, 20 years that encompass water quality improvements, energy improvements, air emission improvements, which are especially important now, as well as recycled water projects. And it's very important that we coordinate closely, because if OPC takes a look at the goals that will be accomplished in construction of these projects, they dovetail quite nicely with the overall goals of OPC. So I just want to leave it at, we really stress the model input needs to be accurate before we make big, expensive decisions that include long-term energy and air emission consequences. We're all for clean water and ready to do our part, and thank you for the opportunity to comment today.
Thank you very much. Not seeing any other public comment in the room. Let's go to virtual public comment.
We have Sean Bothwell followed by Zoe Collins. Sean, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Council. My name is Sean Bothwell. I'm the Executive Director for California Coastkeeper Alliance. I just want to really thank the OPC and staff for committing to this resolution. I think it's really important to not only support the science out there, but really support the State Water Board moving forward with rulemaking and policy making. The OPC has been a leader on this issue for years now. I mean, it's been over a decade now of us discussing the science around ocean acidification and hypoxia, and OPC has been the leader in funding that and supporting that science. So I really want to thank you for all of that. The resolution itself, I want to call out two areas that I think are particularly really important. One is the affirmation of the Roms-Beck model as really, the best science in the world on modeling and ocean acidification and hypoxia. The independent review validated the model, said that it was, has been rigorously scientifically approved, peer-reviewed for years now, and essentially that this model can be used to move forward with setting water quality standards. And so, to Mr. Crater's point earlier, it's really critical that we start moving forward with policy making and not drag our feet on, updating the model over and over again to the regulatory community's perfection. The science is there. Their own panel confirmed that the science is good enough to is the best in the world to move forward with setting water quality standards. And so I'll also flag the OPC's resolution, the resolve clause, supporting the water board moving forward with setting an OA water quality objective. I will flag one last thing, that in the OPC strategic plan, target 121, the goal for the state was to have these water quality objectives done by the end of this year. I think everyone acknowledges that that's probably not going to happen, but I would like the OPC to acknowledge that we should be doing this with some urgency and hopefully setting a goal that we could get this done by the end of 2026. But with that, we support the resolution, thank the OPC for its leadership, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Zoe Collins. Zoe, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, council members and Secretary Crowfoot. My name is Zoe Collins, and I'm speaking to you today on behalf of Heal the Bay, which is a regional nonprofit based in LA County. Heal the Bay recently signed on to a comment letter in partnership with the California Coastkeeper Alliance and NRDC, voicing our support for OPC's leadership in ocean acidification and hypoxia, or OAH. We applaud OPC's decisions to make OAH a top priority in 2025. We support the resolution and commend the council for your hard work on this issue. We're especially grateful for the council's emphasis on research and monitoring, infrastructure updates, technology-based water quality objectives to remove nutrients from ocean wastewater discharges, reducing and preventing OAH hotspots, as well as an implementation framework to eliminate those hotspots. Thank you so much for all of your work and for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you.
There are no other public commenters.
Okay, thanks so much. Maybe I'll start off with just comments and maybe a question or two. First of all, big thanks for all of the work on this. This has been an issue that the Ocean Protection Council and the Water Board and others have been working on for over a decade, and I'm really proud of California's leadership. I participated in a lot of different international convenings on all things climate change, and the leadership of the West Coast on ocean acidification and hypoxia is well recognized across the world, and I was really proud that we were one state to launch this international alliance to combat this challenge across the world. And as recently as 4 months ago, was meeting with countries from around the world who were really excited to understand what can be done. Obviously, as I understand it anyways, one large contributor to this phenomenon is carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, because the ocean, of course, absorbs that. And that's something we're working on across California and the world. And I think what we're talking about today is another potential contributor, which is nutrient load on the coast. I want to acknowledge and thank those representing the sanitation districts and the wastewater agencies for your diligence engaging for the last decade on this. I know you've testified as we've addressed different aspects of this and as we've evolved in our work here. To me, as a non-scientist, this question around the state of the science is a really important one. We are obviously in California want to take the actions that are needed to move as quickly and effectively as possible to protect the coast of ocean health. And at the same time, we do recognize there could ultimately be a cost of compliance for those public agencies that are providing an essential service to us, who are creating nutrient and needing to dispose of that. So maybe a question for Phil would be, recognizing, as one of our commenters said, that the cost of compliance is of significant potential concern, and costs could potentially range into the hundreds of millions or billions of dollars over time, and that agencies build out those costs over time. How do you define sort of, and yet at the same time, listening to Mr. Bothwell and others, historically we put a pretty ambitious time frame on the development of water quality standards. So how would you respond to concerns of regulated entities around the state of the science, and what can we continue to do to strengthen the science as we move towards that policy making realm?
Thank you, Chair. That's a great question. I'm going to try and unpack all of that.
Yeah.
So first of all, I think this is a great touch point in this process, just to recognize this conversation has been developing for quite some time. And we're getting to the point now where we've got tools to help us move into a different gear. I don't think we're shifting into overdrive right now, but we're maybe moving into second gear or something, where we now know that we've got a good scientific basis to look at certain sources of nutrients. We've been looking at wastewater treatment plants. We've heard from wastewater treatment plants and others concerns about being too focused on that area. We've got a lot of comments lately about looking more broadly. There is, as a next step for the water boards, a continuation of a really robust public process. And so that's where the science gets brought to our board, which is our decision maker, and they have the opportunity to consider the costs and the benefits. We have, as a part of all activities that we do at the water board, we really focus on the cost of compliance, and we want to make sure that anything that we're requiring regulated parties to do will bear a benefit that's commensurate with the cost and the burden to do it. And so we want to make sure we're not just turning levers that we can turn. We want to make sure that we're looking at things that we should be doing. Wastewater treatment plants are one part of that, but there may be other sources, and we invite others to come into the water board's process at this point and make sure that we're considering all those factors, and that gets considered in context with the model to look at the discharges. And I guess another assurance is that our water board always wants to have a robust public process. So this is really still a beginning stage for us moving into formal rulemaking on this thing at some point in the future. And so I just want to assure everybody there will be a lot of process, a lot of discussion. Our board members are very interested. We appreciate the working relationship with the OPC and with SCORP, and we intend to continue to look at this report carefully and make sure that we're making metered decisions, and we don't just set a course and close our eyes and go for it. I don't know if that's answering your question, but just really emphasizing we take the cost of compliance very seriously.
Yeah, it is. And let me just share one last comment on this topic. Water Board and our sister environmental agency, Cal EPA, do a lot more regulating than we do here at the Natural Resources Agency. But, you know, my education where we do regulate is that oftentimes our regulated entities, you know, can feel like separate, you know, regulatory requirements when aggregated, you know, create this untenable impact on their activities. And when we think about wastewater treatment plants, for example, that's a service that we rely on across our communities. So one would just be to state the obvious, to understand, you know, cost of compliance vis-a-vis, you know, other regulatory requirements possibly outside of the Water Board. And then two, and you all do a great job of this, is just a really thoughtful and deliberative, you know, discussion with the regulated entities over time. You know, we are, I think, groundbreaking in the science that's being created or that's being generated, and that can be a good thing. Obviously, there's still some level of concern around the fidelity or precision of the science, and so I just want to make sure that as the Water Board considers this and considers setting water quality standards, that there would be a really open and transparent discussion around the state of the science and what it can support as it relates to standard creation.
Yeah, our board has absolutely committed to that, and we remain committed to doing that. And we look to you, you know, and thank you for the support that you provided with your staff, and we'll just continue to engage and again assure that that discussion will occur.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I would just say to our colleagues representing those public agencies, you know, while the Water Board has that role of setting water quality standards, I and we would continue to be glad to be engaged where we can be productive in this discussion. Let me turn it to my colleagues to see if there are any questions or comments.
No questions, just really appreciate the partnership between the water boards and OPC on this. It has been an area of developing science, and really appreciate just reemphasizing the importance and the priorities on both sides and agencies, and I know we'll definitely have that robust public comment process as the water boards are advancing, so thank you.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Yes, sorry, Chair Crowfoot, do you mind if I just place a finer point too? Please. Just on the same level, line of inquiry, a couple of pieces. Just want to emphasize the importance of that early coordination and planning, and that the model results do demonstrate, I mean, just based on volume alone, that the nutrient inputs are from less than a handful of wastewater treatment plants that are over 100 million gallons, that discharge over 100 million gallons daily. And those same facilities are the ones that are actively evaluating infrastructure upgrades or have already or are going to increase or include wastewater recycling. And so having this be part of that early conversation has that potential for early cost savings to prevent that incremental, okay, we're going to advance, water recycling 10 years, 15 years down the line, we're now looking at these needed infrastructure upgrades. So just want to emphasize that need for that early coordination and planning, which is why we designed the resolution language that staff did, as well as very cognizant of the recognition of other sources. So while the language is that dual piece of, yes, we want to have early planning, engaging these discussions now. They've already happened, frankly, for the last few years. This is ongoing discussions when it comes to infrastructure planning and wastewater recycling upgrades. What does nutrient management mean and look like on that site or regional specific scale? And so there are a lot of technical ongoing questions, back to the comments we heard earlier today. So I just want to recognize that that's absolutely top of mind and absolutely a consideration, as well as the consideration of other sources from other land-based runoff, et cetera. Finally, on the point of validation of the model, just a fine point on the number of peer-reviewed publications are well over the dozens, frankly, looking at the data that was integrated pre-2000 as well as 2012 to 2017. The model purposely chose the Southern California Bight because it is so rich in this data that you could do the validation assessments, and that's why last year we brought to this council the preliminary findings and then the recommendation, let's continue this work up the coast. But we began with the Southern California Bight because it is so data rich. Doing the ongoing validation work that was completed, and then confirmed through the independent expert panel review that was just completed last month, that again found the model fit for purpose, also acknowledging that yes, models are predictive, they're models. They absolutely rely on that input of data, always have an opportunity for advancement and refinement, which is reflected in their council resolution today. So thank you.
Yeah, that's really quite helpful. And I would just emphasize the temporal aspect of the standard setting. You know, the more time that and the earlier that this conversation takes place, the better, as well as the phasing in of down the road any compliance to enable the feasible implementation and the cost-effective implementation of any technology upgrades, I think is quite important. But that's, of course, down the road significantly. Seeing no other questions from the council members, I would entertain a motion to consider this to the resolution.
Sure, I'll do it. I move that we approve the resolution on ocean acidification and hypoxia as drafted in the staff report.
Thank you, Matt. Commissioner Dumlau makes the motion.
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Jackson. Could we call the roll?
Chair Crowfoot,
Yes.
Katie Landau,
Yes.
Matthew Dumlau,
Yes.
Alexis Jackson,
Yes.
Megan Rocha. Sorry, Megan, I can't hear you. Can you try one more time?
So let's try Megan one more time and then we'll move on. All right, then let's close the roll and the motion passes. Thank you everyone for that came to share public comment, and thank you, Mr. Crater.
Thank you all for your support. Appreciate it.
Our next item is number 7, which is an informational item, and it is an update on marine carbon dioxide removal considerations for California. Shreya Gopal who is our Coastal Habitats Program Manager and is going to present on this, and then we'll invite members of the public to share any comments they have on this topic. Welcome.
Good afternoon, council members, Chair Crowfoot. It's my pleasure today to present on considerations for marine carbon dioxide removal for California. Next slide, please. Carbon dioxide removal, or CDR, refers to removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and storing it long-term in either land, underground, or geologic reservoir, which is also referred to as sequestration. And marine CDR refers to approaches that use ocean processes to achieve the same thing, to increase the ocean's capacity to store carbon dioxide, either and storing it either in the ocean or elsewhere in a geologic reservoir. So CDR has been proposed as one solution in a suite of solutions to combat climate change and to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and meet our net zero targets. And as you're all aware, in California, recognizing the science and the need to aggressively mitigate and combat climate change, the state passed 2 statutes in relation to CDR. One is AB 1279, and this is paired with SB 905. AB 1279 mandates that the state be carbon neutral by 2045, and this is outlined through pathways in California Air Resources Board's scoping plan. CARB has a 2022 update to its scoping plan that deals with this. In addition, CARB is also tasked with coming up with a plan to implement carbon capture and carbon dioxide removal technologies to demonstrate, regulate, and implement these for the state, and evaluate these for the state. So in recognition of that, and in recognition of the recent acceleration in interest in marine CDR in the last decade at the federal level, there have been several reports and strategies that have been published. NOAA had a research strategy published in 2023, and the White House published a broader governance and research strategy in 2024 on marine CDR. And this is why we are bringing this informational item to the council today. Next slide, please. So there are broadly two basic approaches to MCDR. One is the biotic or the biological approach, and the other is the abiotic or non-biological altering seawater chemistry kind of an approach. The first one is where approaches target altering the ocean's carbon pump, which is a set of processes that actually take carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, fix it into organic matter, which is then sequestered into the deep ocean, primarily through just movement of this matter into the deep ocean. So this is a way to enhance ocean's capacity to take in more carbon dioxide. There's also another way to accomplish this. This is by manipulating ocean chemistry and altering the carbonate-bicarbonate buffer system that the ocean already has. There are techniques that you can use to increase the drawdown by lowering the surface water acidity, and primarily these are through engineered approaches. Next slide, please. Just some examples of this that have been considered and looked at in the last many years. The biological pump approach is primarily, as you can imagine, it's seaweed cultivation and sinking into the deep ocean, or something like an ocean nutrient fertilization, where you would add a nutrient such as iron that might be limiting in a region of the ocean. You stimulate that phytoplankton production, which would then presumably be drawn down into the ocean and go into the deep, things like that. Many studies also consider blue carbon restoration, which is like habitat restoration, such as eelgrass and coastal wetlands, into this biotic approach, but we're not going to consider that here because that already has an extensive body of data and efforts through the lens of coastal habitat restoration. In the second portion, which is the abiotic approach, there are two key approaches that have been considered. One is enhancing the alkalinity of the ocean, basically by increasing the pH of the ocean by adding minerals to it, for instance. Or, a second process is where you would use electrochemistry to actually strip the carbon dioxide away from seawater and thereby enhance its ability to draw down more carbon dioxide. Next slide, please. Here is a comparison of the four basic approaches that I talked about. The top two are the biotic, and the last two are the abiotic. Just to put some context around these numbers, there is a lot in here to digest. So in general, the carbon removal potential of a scaled up version of these approaches is similar. It's on the order of 100 million metric tons to 1,000 million metric tons. But I just want to emphasize that for the top two, there are huge uncertainties in this number because we really don't have demonstrated evidence that the carbon that's actually fixed is actually sequestered away for long enough periods of time. So that's the uncertainty there. And you can see that the cost for every million metric ton of this also spans a very wide range. And it's significant at this point, 65 million all the way to 2,500 million. And another context there is that CARB's target for carbon dioxide removal approaches by 2030 is on the order of 20 million metric tons. And it's likely that some of these costs could come down with increased research, but this is where the range is right now. And when we look at California and the geographical context here, for instance, seaweed cultivation, the scalability statewide is likely limited because there are several conflicting ocean uses and there is a significant amount of area needed to scale these efforts. And for OIF or iron fertilization, what you're looking at is open waters which are nutrient deficient, which is really not the case in California. We have an upwelling system, as you just heard, that supplies nutrient-rich waters here. For OAE and the electrochemical approaches, there are several considerations for siting, which to be determined, but include issues like ocean access, availability of electricity, and a co-location with existing infrastructure and things like that. So the last column is one that we would really like to emphasize today, and this is a critical need of coming up with an environmental impact framework to figure out where each of these technologies stand in terms of impact to ocean ecosystems, their health, fisheries, and systems that depend on them. For instance, for seaweed cultivation, you can see that there are several impacts potentially to habitats and ecosystems. And for OIF, there are ecological impacts, and if you're looking at iron mining, there are life cycle considerations of energy involved in acquisition of the iron. And for California, there is also the significant risk of increasing harmful algal blooms by adding more nutrients. For the engineered approaches, there could be changes to biogeochemistry because you're changing the composition of the water, seawater. There's also mining because if you're adding minerals to the water, there could be considerations for that. And for electrochemical approaches, there are other issues that come up or need to be considered with intake of large volumes of seawater, like entrainment, impingement, and mortality to marine life, or effluent discharge considerations like impact on marine habitats and adjacent MPAs, for instance. So safely managing byproducts and these projects, even at pilot scales and prior to being scaled up, is going to be essential when we think about MCDR for California. Next slide, please. Okay. So just wanted to touch on a few pilot or experimental scale projects that we've seen so far. The first one is seaweed cultivation and sinking studies off of the coast of Santa Barbara Basin and federal waters. These were mostly for data gathering, so we've seen some of these happen. And then the second two are the ones that had pilots in Alta Sea. That's the image that you see on the right, in a barge off of the port of LA. The first one is the electrochemical one, which is also a direct ocean capture. It's by a company called Captura. Basically, the seawater is electrodialyzed and carbon dioxide is removed from the seawater. So that project is still ongoing at 100 tons CO2 per year, and this is being expanded to a 1,000-ton project in Hawaii. The second is done by a company called Aquatic, which uses a combination of OAE and electrochemical approaches to remove carbon dioxide, and this is complete, although they are expanding their projects to Canada and a larger scale plant in Singapore. Next slide, please. So we recognize that while MCDR science itself is not really new, right, but the application to California coast and ocean is, and that's what really warrants careful consideration. So our primary focus would be on approaches that are actually relevant, just relevant to scalability in California, and answer key questions and address gaps and questions like, does the approach actually successfully sequester carbon for sufficiently long periods of time? That's a question that's under the remit of CARB to really answer, what is the efficacy of this process? What's the permanence of this process? And then scalability is going to be a big concern too. Is this actually going to be scalable, and is the scale sufficient to make a dent on the climate change problem that we're trying to combat? And there are critical procedural and knowledge gaps that exist in the regulatory regime because these technologies were not really designed to fit into the regimes that exist right now. So we are trying to figure out how best to kind of go about answering those questions. So, and permitting would really be site-specific and technology-specific and involve multiple jurisdictions, federal, state, local agencies, and these would need early coordination across these agencies. And we also recognize that MCDR has the potential to impact positively and negatively the communities it's adjacent to. So the community engagement needs to start really early from the design through the execution of the MCDR research projects. So to conclude this, we just want to emphasize that interagency coordination will be essential. And OPC has initiated early agency coordination discussions and information sharing to make sure that, in consistency with the Council's mission to align state efforts and to protect the state coast and ocean resources, we engage our fellow agencies and external partners and have them into the discussions and consider this with a balanced mindset of benefits and risks to California waters. With that, I want to thank you for your time, and I'm happy to address questions.
Thank you so much. Fascinating update. I want to turn to anyone from the public that would like to comment on this, either in the room or virtually. I'm not seeing anyone in the room approaching the podium, so let's turn to virtual.
we have one virtual commenter, Janine Ash. Janine, you have the floor.
Hello, thank you, Secretary Crowfoot, Dr. Gopal, and council members. I'm Janine Ash, the Director of Ocean Alkalinity Enhancement at Capture 6, a Berkeley-based carbon dioxide removal company. California leads the world with its climate goals, which require both rapid emissions reductions and CDR. Already, immense progress has been made on both fronts, with multiple federally and state-funded pilot projects for new green technologies and incentives like LCFS. To advance and meet these goals, the Climate Change Scoping Plan update includes a CDR target of 20 and 100 million tons of CO2 removal by 2030 and 2045, respectively. Without MCDR playing a role, meeting these goals would be difficult, if not impossible, to achieve. MCDR technologies are among the most affordable, scalable, and permanent CO2 removals available, and they can provide valuable co-benefits to ecosystems and communities. Multiple MCDR companies are headquartered in California due to its forward-thinking climate goals, talented workforce, world-leading ocean research institutes, and unique coastline. We're eager to contribute to California's climate goals and support the science-based, community-first approach that OPC is taking. We encourage furthering the interagency collaboration that you are already engaged in by including the California Energy Commission, who can provide important information from its experiences with funding direct air capture pilots like Capture 6's Project Monarch in LA County. MCDR pilots facilitated by public-private partnerships are crucial to answer remaining questions about these technologies, their science, safety, and to demonstrate their benefits to California ratepayers. Thank you so much for your work in this area and for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much for that public comment, and fascinating to understand that there are so many entities in California that are really leading the way on this. One question I had is, when you look around the world, are there parts of the world or governments that are actively investing in technology development? Or would you say California is on, given some of these entities here in California on the forefront? How would you characterize the state of the technology development across the world?
I think I'd like to think that it's similar to what Janine mentioned. There is a lot of public-private partnerships that have recently been kindled. And I would say that this is what has been really driving a lot of the innovation. Many of the leading technology companies are based out of California, but there are also others across the world that are conducting a lot of research. And I think, OPC, in our early evaluations, we did look globally to see who else had some of these technologies technologies under consideration. And it's definitely something of an emerging field for California.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I saw the photo of Alta Sea, which is, of course, such an interesting blue economy and blue technology incubator in Southern California. And so I'll just say that I think it's wonderful that OPC is playing this leadership role within state government and driving the interagency partnerships to understand what is the potential of this, what are the benefits, what are the potential liabilities or impacts, how to assess those, and then how to even consider in the future what expanding these pilots could look like. Yeah. I think it's admirable how sort of proactive we are on this. Good. Yes, we got two comments. I'll turn to Alexis and then Matt and then Katie.
Thank you for the update. I think that it's right for us to be exploring this, and there's obviously charges that, mandate that. And so we need to be really thoughtful, I think, in our approach. I think especially given, there was a mention about affordability of these interventions. I think the pretty significant cost is reason alone to look really carefully at them. I think that my main thought about this is that wanting to make sure that we are making the adequate investments in monitoring and evaluation so that we can actually say very clearly if these technologies are delivering the outcomes that we anticipate, and to make sure that in all these conversations we don't lose sight of the North Star, which is ultimately the upstream reductions that we know are directly tied to emissions. So just wanted to put that out there.
Absolutely. I do want to touch on that because that's something I did not elaborate on today because that's a huge topic of research and interest. It's monitoring and MRV, which is a measurement, reporting, and verification. So monitoring to ensure that upstream impacts and the downstream impacts are captured, measuring the carbon, reporting it, and verifying that it's actually sequestered away. So these are some of the biggest areas of investment needed and bottlenecks at this point. So yeah, I definitely see the value in some of that effort.
Yeah, and I would just add, geoengineering is a category that oftentimes encompasses new, promising, but also uncertain technologies like this. And so to understand and to do the early monitoring and the pilot seems so essential. So we understand both the benefits, but also, again, the potential negative impacts. And I so appreciate making the point around we continue to maintain priority on attacking pollution at the upstream. California's scoping plan identifies that the vast majority of our achievement of carbon neutrality will be from slashing carbon pollution, which has so many other benefits, including public health. And it'll be a small portion of our carbon neutrality that we achieve as a result of sequestration, either engineered sequestration or natural sequestration. So thank you so much for making that point. Matt.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm certainly much more familiar with the terrestrial carbon reduction strategies out there. A year or so ago, went to a direct air capture facility and I have a little piece of concrete on my desk that was generated using that process. So I was really struck by just how many questions we have, really. There's a lot of things that we don't know. Completely agree with all the comments about monitoring. Like, there's a lot that we don't know. And so I really appreciate that OPC is at this point asking those questions, pushing it, and making sure that we as a state have that information to guide decisions and investments along the way. I think, where there are co-benefits, that will be very important to identify. I think of soil sequestration and putting more organic matter in the soil, as one example, can increase the water holding capacity of soils, great for drought conditions. My background's in soil science. And so, where we can find those co-benefits will be helpful too, and also, demonstrating that there are more reasons to do these things than just the carbon reduction, and maybe that can help, factor into the cost piece of things. And then, the last comment is really just thank you for the interagency collaboration as well. The Lieutenant Governor is on this council because she's chair of State Lands Commission. So, the extent to which state lands can be helpful in being a voice or a participant in this process. I know the commission is very eager to support these types of forward-leaning, initiatives like this. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Katie.
Thank you for the presentation. It was really encompassing and very helpful. I first just really want to acknowledge the partnership and the collaboration that OPC has been having with the Air Resources Board, specifically on this topic. I know that our board's been, particularly with your assistance, I've been appreciative of the assistance that OPC has been providing with the scientific and the technical help in identifying those potential ocean ecosystem concerns and benefits. As you mentioned, this work is really supporting our broader efforts to achieve that carbon neutrality goal by 2045, and we know that CDR is going to be a super important tool in our toolbox to meet that target. As some of my fellow council members have mentioned, it's going to be really important with that monitoring piece. I know the Air Board has been working on that, and they have an important role in that as well. And just as we're moving forward with this, and particularly looking at getting projects deployed and scaling up the scope of those projects, just making sure that we're taking every step to ensure that the marine CDRs meet our existing environmental safeguards. So I know we'll be doing that, but thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Gopal. Appreciate it. Look forward to subsequent updates. We'll next move to agenda item 8, which is an action item, and we will consider and potentially approve the disbursement of funding to advance the management of our state marine protected area or MPA network. And welcome Dr. Stacy Lewis, our colleague who is the manager of the Marine Protected Areas Network here at OPC to present an update.
Yes, thank you. Secretary Crowfoot, council members, meeting participants, both here in the room and virtually. With deep enthusiasm, I present on item 8 today, Advanced Management of California's NPA Network. Next slide, please. This investment in 5 projects will advance several decadal management review recommendations, specifically for NPA monitoring, engagement, and enforcement. This investment also advances OPC strategic goal number 2, to advance equity, and 3, to enhance coastal and marine biodiversity. 2 of the 5 projects will focus on ecological monitoring and will fill critical gaps to get us to 2027. With this investment, it will be the first time that all 5 ecological monitoring programs are funded as a cohesive monitoring program. The other 3 projects will scale out and continue successful human-centered research, monitoring, and engagement projects. All 5 of these projects will directly inform the update to the NPA Monitoring Action Plan, which is anticipated to be finalized in 2026. Next slide, please. The first project is item 8.1, Ecological Monitoring of Mid-Depth Habitats. Monitoring the network's deep rocky habitats faces the greatest challenges, technologically, logistically, and economically. And these challenges caused a gap in monitoring in 2023 and 2024. To address these challenges, we convened a technical expert panel in 2024 to develop recommendations for monitoring this habitat, which informed this competitive solicitation. In September, this council approved $1.5 million for projects selected through this competitive solicitation. Today's recommendation seeks approval to disperse these funds for the selected projects and to augment this amount by $160,000 for an up to amount of $1.66 million. Based on the results of an independent review panel of the submitted proposal, this investment will fund 2 research groups to conduct complementary monitoring in 25 and 26, and these 2 groups are MARE and the University of California, Santa Barbara. These groups will use different tools. MARE will use remote operated vehicles. University of California, Santa Barbara will use baited remote underwater videos. Per the technical panel's recommendations, funding these complementary tools enables more robust data of this habitat than data collected by one tool in isolation. These complementary monitoring tools and efforts will be analyzed to determine the most effective monitoring strategies moving forward and to update our NPA Monitoring Action Plan. Next slide. The second project for NPA ecological monitoring is to support the California Collaborative Fisheries Research Program, or CCFRP. OPC's investments have enabled CCFRP to generate scientifically rigorous data collection and analysis for NPA monitoring, but also to conduct meaningful outreach and education activities with fishermen, scientists, and the general public. Since the establishment of the network, CCFRP developed a standardized statewide monitoring project that involves recreational anglers in hook and line surveys inside and outside NPAs. With this $1.38 million investment, CCFRP will be able to continue their ecological data across deep and shallow rocky reef habitats, as well as continue their community outreach and education activities. Okay, next I will move on to our 3 projects that are focused on human-centered research, monitoring, and engagement. Next slide, please. Item 8.3, benefits and barriers, social dimensions of ocean access and NPAs. To date, OPC-funded research has explored the intersection of California's diverse communities with NPAs, in particular, highlighting how targeted outreach and education can improve human engagement within NPAs. The $750,000 investment to California Marine Sanctuary Foundation will build from a successful 2023 Climate and NPA Proposition 68 project. Selected through a competitive process, the 2023 Prop 68 project collected over 2,000 surveys in 3 different languages and focused on 3 counties with strong samples from underrepresented communities. You can see the 3 counties in the light blue boxes on the map on that slide. This project is now poised to expand into 5 new counties, highlighted as dark blue boxes on that map. Through building community partnerships and supporting various graduate students and their researchers, we will illuminate how ocean access, activities, and benefits vary among California's coastal communities, and how these benefits are influenced by social and environmental change. Next slide, please. The next investment item is 8.4, NPA Watch, Understanding Human Uses and Compliance. Since 2011, and with the support from OPC and Resources Legacy Fund, NPA Watch has collected over 54,000 surveys on consumptive and non-consumptive uses inside and outside of NPAs. Using these matching funds, NPA Watch developed an intercept survey to provide initial information related to NPA compliance and awareness of NPA regulations. In 2024, these surveys were piloted in 2 NPA Watch programs and over 200 surveys were collected. This $500,000 investment would be administered and matched by Resources Legacy Fund, and it would allow the NPA Watch to expand to 3 additional NPA Watch programs and to implement the survey year-round in San Diego and Orange counties. Ultimately, this project will enhance the state's understanding of human uses in and around NPAs, as well as help us collect new forms of human dimensions data. Next slide, please. Final investment is 8.5, Enforcement and Community Engagement and NPA Management. Effective management and the success of NPAs really relies upon compliance and proper enforcement of NPA laws and regulations. Through previous OPC funding, NPA Collaborative Network has advanced OPC priorities on effective enforcement, compliance, equity, and ocean access. The Collaborative Network works with hundreds of allied agency enforcement partners across the state to ensure maximum compliance of NPA regulations. They do this through hosting enforcement trainings and developing online trainings for violators. They work closely with CDFW Law Enforcement Division, Marine Region leaderships, and regionally based field staff. The graphic here on the left is a summary of some of their initiative accomplishments in 2023. I'll walk you through just a few. During 2023, the Collaborative Network trained 138 officers, over 50 distinct agencies and departments. Participating departments reported 665 violations and made 43,000 contacts and verbal warnings in 2023. With this $250,000 investment, the Collaborative Network will foster effective coordination among agency partners and deputy district attorneys and investigators. This investment will also allow the Collaborative Network to continue its building pathways to JEDI for California's Coast and Ocean Initiative. Specifically, this investment will support the continuation of 3 of their pathway groups to uplift and empower underrepresented communities. It will also allow the Collaborative Network to provide honorarium to tribal community members to participate in collaborative meetings and projects. Next slide. OPC staff recommends disbursement of up to $4.54 million across 5 projects and 6 grantees. These investments are critical to continue foundational ecological monitoring and to better understand social, cultural, and economic outcomes and benefits of the NPA network on coastal communities. This work will inform ongoing adaptive management decisions, as well as providing important information needed to update the NPA Monitoring Action Plan. Next slide. Thank you, and I will take any questions.
Thank you very much, Stacy. Let's move to public comment, and I welcome any. First, I want to just, sorry to have you stand up. I was reminded that we have somebody from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife joining virtually.
Yes, Sarah Warden. Sorry, one second. Sarah, you have the floor.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
We can.
Okay, wonderful. Good afternoon, Chair Crowfoot and council members. Sarah Warden, environmental scientist with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife's Marine Region. It's my pleasure to join you today on behalf of the department to lend our support for funding to continue advancement of critical work for the management of the state's MPA network. The funding under item 8 will help address key adaptive management recommendations from our recent network review, including filling gaps in human dimensions monitoring, continuing the essential investments in our MPA monitoring program, and supporting the nexus between the department's MPA and fisheries management priorities. The department thanks the council and council staff for our continued partnership, and thank you again for giving me the time to express our support for the funding package under item 8. And I'm happy to stay on the line if you have any questions.
Thank you very much for all of your partnership. Appreciate it. Okay, let's turn to in-person public comment. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Crowfoot, council members. David Bess. I'm representing backcountry hunters and anglers today, and BHA respectfully requests approval of disbursement of these funds to advance the management of California's MPA network. The work that will be done with the approval of this investment is imperative to the long-term sustainability of our marine protected areas. Thank you for the time to speak.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Mio Senzaki. I'm an Ocean Conservation Associate with Environment California. We are a statewide environmental advocacy group. I would just like to say thank you so much for your efforts in protecting our ocean and marine ecosystems. And I moved to the Bay Area last summer. I'm originally from Japan, and I immediately fell in love with how beautiful California is and the natural wonders that it offers. And however, it's really sad to think that our ocean is in trouble right now, and it really needs protection. And on behalf of Environment California and our supporters, I would like to express my support for all 5 projects as we recognize the importance of MPAs as an effective tool to protect the existing healthy kelp forests and marine ecosystems and species. And I believe that these projects will be crucial to management of MPA network in California and serve as crucial investments in the future of states' ocean and coastal resources. And these projects align with the state's commitment to ocean health, climate resilience, and equitable access to marine resources. So that's why we request that the OPC approves the funding allocations for all 5 projects, as they each play a critical role in enhancing the effectiveness and resilience of the MPA network. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Angela Kemsley. I'm the Director of Conservation Impact at Wild Coast, and I'm here to voice my strong support for Dr. Stacy Lewis's funding package and to give you just a little bit of background on the MPA Watch Intercept surveys. So to really understand the efficacy of California's marine protected areas, we need to know how people are interacting with them and if they're following the regulations. MPA Watch was started to do just this, and since we started, we've expanded to collect over 54,000 human use surveys at over 115 sites in 75 MPAs in partnership with over 10 organizations along the coast of California. Our data help create a snapshot of how people are using the coast and provide valuable information for the adaptive management of California's marine protected areas. This work has been supported by the OPC for the past several years, so we really appreciate your continued support. And to complement the core MPA Watch protocol, MPA Watch, in partnership with UC Davis and with support from OPC, piloted the intercept surveys last year in San Diego and Orange counties, where volunteers actually talk to people to assess their knowledge and attitude towards MPAs. We conducted 213 surveys, which gave us some initial really important insights into MPA compliance and whether people really understand the regulations. We see a great opportunity to expand this work both temporally and geographically, and would really appreciate your support in this endeavor. Again, we really appreciate the OPC's continued support, which has made over a decade of data collection with the original MPA Watch protocol possible, and is now supporting this vital new phase with the intercept surveys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Secretary Crowfoot, council members, and OPC staff. Good afternoon. My name is Katie O'Donnell, and I am the U.S. Ocean Conservation Manager at Wild Coast. Thank you so much for this opportunity to express my strong support for Dr. Lewis's funding package that she presented. And I will build on a bit of what Angela just shared about MPA Watch and the intercept surveys. This funding is crucial for the next phase of this MPA Watch intercept surveys. As mentioned by Angie and Dr. Lewis's presentation, we have been collecting observational data, and the intercept surveys will allow us to have conversations with people, and is a complementary protocol to the original MPA Watch statewide protocol. We'll be asking a variety of things like where they're visiting from, what do they know about MPAs, where they've traveled from, and this is really key to understanding how people are using these areas and how management can be more effective, ultimately ensuring that MPAs achieve their conservation goals. With your support, we are hoping to start this new phase and expand the intercept survey to pilot in a couple different ways. As mentioned, we're first going to have this year-round survey in Southern California, and this is going to help us understand MPA users how the change throughout the year. And then we also are going to have these additional programs throughout the state with the goal of actually having a representation in each of the 3 MPA bioregions to see how perceptions and knowledge vary across the state. So this new program would also take a seasonal approach to their implementation, which mirrors what Wild Coast and Orange County Coastal Keeper did in the first phase of this intercept survey project. We're really excited about this project and greatly appreciate OPC's support. This investment will help us get a much clearer picture on public understanding of compliance in marine protected areas, and that's essential for making sure that California's MPAs are successful for generations to come. Thank you again for your continued support. We really appreciate all the work that you do. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello again. This is Carla Garibay, the Ocean Conservation Policy Manager with the Monterey Bay Aquarium. We really want to express our support for the disbursement of funds to advance the adaptive management of the MPA network. California's MPA network was the first ever statewide network in the U.S. and continues to be one of the most extensive in the world. I wanted to share an example of the type of research that is possible thanks to long-term monitoring. One of my aquarium colleagues, Dr. Josh Smith, is the lead author of a recently published study that evaluates the performance of 59 MPAs in the California network across 4 primary ecosystems. Dr. Smith is part of the NC's California MPA Working Group, which is made up of experts in MPA monitoring, ecology, and socioeconomics. NC's is the National Center for Ecological Analysis and Synthesis. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. But together, these researchers compiled long-term data on 170 taxa from MPA monitoring efforts across 4 habitats: the surf zone, kelp forest, shallow reef, and deep reef. And the study found that MPAs increased fish biomass across the network and identified MPA characteristics that correlate strongly with conservation benefits, things like habitat diversity, high levels of protection. And this type of analysis, which analyzed 4 habitats at once, just would not have been possible without long-term monitoring data. So thank you for continuing to fund ecological monitoring. Long-term comprehensive monitoring is absolutely critical for science-based future management actions. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, Secretary Crowfoot and council members. Liz Parasenti, I'm a program officer at Resources Legacy Fund. We've been a long-term partner to OPC and the Resources Agency for many years, decades, and we're really excited about this suite of investments. We offer our support for all of the ones in this item. Thank you, Dr. Lewis, for this amazing summary of all the great work that will be done. They will provide important social ecological science, they'll provide community engagement, and they'll support broader MPA management. With regards to the expanding MPA Watch program's investment, we've been a long-term funder to MPA Watch. We helped to start the program over a decade ago. We remain a committed funder throughout the investments that OPC has also made in it, and we continue that match funding into this next phase of expanding it to get that survey data from people on the beaches to understand who is using MPAs, what do they know about them, and how can we better support everyone's understanding of these important places on our coast. So thank you for your consideration for all of the items and for this item on MPA Watch in particular. Look forward to continuing to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Lily Schneekluth and I'm a junior at UC Davis. I'm studying environmental science and management. I'm also a Marine Protected Area Watch Intercept Survey intern for the UC Davis Center for Community and Citizen Science. I'm happy to be standing here before you all today to discuss this agenda item. So before my internship at UC Davis, I interned at Orange County Coastkeeper, and in this role, I conducted the Marine Protected Area Watch Intercept surveys. And these were to collect, as mentioned, the beachgoers' opinions, the knowledge and trends of use in MPAs. This experience was really invaluable to me, and I connected with many people about their love for the ocean and their support for marine protected areas while gathering a lot of social science data. So the allocation of $500,000 to the Resources Legacy Fund mentioned in Agenda Item 8 will allow the MPA Watch Network to continue the development of this intercept survey and to accumulate more information about human dimensions research and public opinions about MPAs. So information from these surveys is really critical in understanding the steps for continued conservation policies as well. And this money will also support the expansion of our pilot survey and similar research projects. More communities members will be able to have the same experience that I'd had talking to people on the beaches, and it will further education in the marine protected areas and ocean conservation that will help my generation and future generations with access to the ocean, healthy oceans. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's move to public comment virtually.
First, we have Aubrey Fowler, followed by Ricky Erickson. Aubrey, you have the floor.
Good afternoon. I'm Aubrey Fowler, South Coast Specialist at the MPA Collaborative Network. We are so grateful to the team at OPC and for Dr. Stacy Lewis's leadership as OPC's MPA Network Manager. The MPA Collaborative Network, a key player in the MPA statewide leadership team, facilitates on-the-ground MPA stewardship through 14 locally based collaboratives. We are an organization dedicated to inclusion in MPA management, equity in process and participation, diverse engagement of people with differing viewpoints, and justice in coastal management. We encourage you to support all MPA programs and projects in Item 8 and approve the funding proposed today. Justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion are integrated in everything we do, and we also devote space for these principles through the Pathways Initiative. Collaborative Network Pathways affinity groups create welcoming spaces to disadvantaged groups historically excluded from participation in coastal management, allowing them the space and agency to lead discussions about fostering greater inclusion. Our ongoing collaboration with tribes, land managers, and enforcement officers is supported through our dedicated communication to improve cooperation across sectors, backgrounds, and views, resulting in greater MPA compliance. We appreciate OPC for recognizing the importance of efforts to remove barriers and increase and broaden stakeholder engagement in MPA and coastal resource management. Thank you for supporting MPA stewardship for a healthy ocean.
Thank you.
Next, we have Ricky Erickson, followed by Chris Voss. Ricky, you have the floor. Ricky, you're on mute.
Okay. Am I now on unmute? Great.
Yep, we hear you.
Great. Good afternoon, Chair Crowfoot, council members, and OPC staff. My name is Dr. Ricky Erickson, lead scientist at California Marine Sanctuary Foundation. The 2024 condition reports of California's ocean overall is poor to fair, based on science from NOAA's National Marine Fisheries Service, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and National Marine Sanctuaries, with concerns raised this year by the NMFS that resilience is not likely to be sustained into the future. In addition, our MPA network, while guided by scientific guidelines, falls short of science design recommendations, with 90% smaller and 68% farther apart than scientists recommended. We fully support Dr. Lewis's proposed funding to advance MPA implementation for all of the projects proposed. As you are aware, information about our state-managed species is sorely lacking, and the CCFRP project, which relies on the fishing community to collect data, is some of the best information that we have and critical to enlisting the support of the fishing community. In addition, we fully support funding to understand the social dimensions of our MPA network and know that Californians overwhelmingly support our network, with 91% supporting the network and 82% of Californians supporting expansion. This social dimensions project is poised now to expand into 5 new coastal counties to illuminate how ocean access, activities, and benefits vary among California's coastal communities. We are at a critical point in ocean conservation in California and are facing opposition at every step. And we are looking to you and appreciate the Ocean Protection Council as the lead state agency to ensure that our MPA network is managed and implemented to reach its intended goals. We truly appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Chris Voss, followed by Anupa Asokan. Chris, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Secretary Crowfoot and council members. My name is Chris Voss, and I'm the president of the Commercial Fishermen of Santa Barbara. And I want to speak in pretty strong opposition to Agenda Item 8, because I feel like, in contrast to Agenda Item 9, a $4.5 million investment in the MPA monitoring is a little bit inappropriate for the Ocean Protection Council to allocate at this point in addressing the challenges we face. And I don't think I would have opposed this a month ago. I'm bringing this up in relationship to my earlier comment with respect to our needs to get information around fisheries. I'm not sure how well the CCFRP program is integrated into fisheries management and decision-making, but it sounded more like it was an ecological information stream. And I would suggest that we try to make these investments more practical in relationship to allowing commercial fisheries to continue in the face of low data. And so while I fully support the MPA network and the benefits that it's bringing, I would encourage the decision makers and policymakers to recognize that the contribution MPAs make to the fisheries is something that should be focused on and not discarded. And an effort should be made to recognize that the resiliency of the system is enhanced by MPAs, but we need to demonstrate that in analyses that put forth the benefit that MPAs have in spillover and other aspects of their function. I appreciate you allowing me to make this comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have Anupa, followed by Jamie Diamond. Anupa, you have the floor.
Hi, thank you so much. This is Anupa Asokan, Executive Director of Fish On. On behalf of our angling and spearfishing communities, I just want to affirm our support for each of the 5 proposed projects. This collective work is so important to supporting ecosystem health and informing better management of our MPA network. In particular, our fishing communities have enjoyed the opportunity to support data collection and monitoring through the Collaborative Fisheries Research Program. This not only enhances scientific understanding of MPAs and fisheries, but also is an important opportunity to connect anglers to the science and help us better understand the value and importance of MPAs to resource health. All of these projects are crucial investments in the future of our coasts, and on behalf of Fish On, thank you for your support and commitment to our MPA network.
Thank you.
Next, we have Jamie Dimon, followed by Larry Phillips. Jamie, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Chairman Crowfoot and council members. I am Jamie Diamond. My husband and I own 2 charter sport fishing boats out of Santa Barbara, California. We are about as mom and pop as it gets. And in about 2009, we were approached by the Cassell Lab to create this amazing opportunity to research these new things that were going to be MPAs, although not new to the Channel Islands area, but and unfortunately the projects weren't funded. And it was years until the projects were funded in a way that it could expand up the coast. Our boats were used and are currently used still to do the CCFRP surveys for inside and outside the MPAs. And this is really critical work. But even more so, we're at a point right now where not only do the CCFRP projects need to be funded, the funding needs to be doubled, because we are now at a point where we can start a new time series and expand sampling across the rest of the MPAs. There is so little data that comes from this that otherwise could come from it. All of the foundational work exists now, and so the frameworking for this, and so the ability to expand this across more MPAs, to do more sampling during different times of the year is really important. And I just want to point out that boats and businesses like my husband's and mine, we've been doing this, again, as I said, since the beginning, but we haven't been able, we don't raise our rates, our charter prices, and I'm not saying this for the money for ourselves, but point being, there are other businesses that can't afford to keep doing these trips at the rates that we get paid because these trips aren't funded at the rate they should. CCFRP doesn't have the ability to go out and collect and do fundraising the way other groups do for their projects. And I just hope you take that into consideration when you're funding universities and like Cassell Lab and other CCFRP projects. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Next, we have Larry Phillips, followed by Zoe Collins. Larry, you have the floor.
Great. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Thank you, Chair Crowfoot, members of the council. For the record, my name is Larry Phillips, and I cover Pacific Fisheries Policy for the American Sport Fishing Association. And on behalf of the association, we support funding specifically for the RUV research and the California Collaborative Fisheries Research Program. As you may be aware, the Pacific Fisheries Management Council meets actually beginning tomorrow in Vancouver, Washington, to discuss critical fisheries management issues. And a key agenda item is H4A, which will evaluate the potential use of ROV data to enhance the stock assessment of quillback rockfish. This is an essential step toward ensuring the sustainability of the species. ROV work provides high quality fishery independent data that traditional survey methods can't capture, particularly in the deep structured complex habitats where quillback and other nearshore species reside. So by continuing to invest in this research, California is leading the way in science-based fisheries management that will help ensure the regulatory decisions are made on the best data available. And we can't reiterate enough how important this work is to better understanding all of the nearshore fish species, and look forward to appreciate an opportunity to voice our support for this research. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Zoe Collins, followed by our final speaker, Tom Hafer. Zoe, you have the floor.
Good afternoon again, council members and Secretary Crowfoot. My name is Zoe Collins. I'm the Marine Protected Area Program Coordinator for Gila Bay in Los Angeles County. We want to express enthusiastic support for all 5 proposed projects, recognizing their individual and collective importance to the health and management of California's MPA network. Now more than ever, it's incredibly important to strengthen California's MPA network through support of cross-agency and community partnerships, research, equitable community engagement, compliance, partner agency capacity, especially related to DMR implementation, and understanding of human use within MPAs. Heal the Bay has been a proud MPA Watch coordinator since 2012, and it continues to be a program with tremendous merit both regionally and statewide. The data MPA Watch collects tells an important story about coastal resource use and management. Understanding human use within MPAs and the factors that influence compliance is crucial for effective management and enforcement, ultimately ensuring MPAs achieve their conservation goals. MPA Watch volunteers continue to develop their sense of stewardship for the ocean and are empowered by their belief that they're capable of making a difference in their community. Our organization has historically helped pilot the MPA Watch Intercept Survey and found tremendous merit in this data and initiative. We urge the OPC to approve the funding allocations for this and all 5 MPA projects, as they each play a critical role in enhancing the effectiveness and resilience of the entire MPA network. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next, we have Tom Hafer, our final speaker. Tom, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Mr. Crowfoot. So I'm the president of the Morro Bay Fishing Organization. I've been fishing over 50 years commercially. I really don't think we need to put any more MPAs in. The MPAs that we have already on the Central Coast, they took all our best fishing grounds away, all the biggest reefs, the points. So I really don't think we need to put any more in. And, you know, I hear a lot of things about the ocean's in trouble and we need to save it and we need to protect it more. You know what? I don't see that. I don't know where you people see that at. I don't know what oceans you're in. I see a healthy ocean. I see a lot of top predators. I see a lot of sea otters. You know, I just don't see all the doom and gloom you people see. And I know I'm out there more than you are. So I don't know why you're spreading so much misinformation. And, you know, another thing is this whole research deal, you know, when the MPAs got developed on the Central Coast, they engaged the fishermen in doing the work. We partnered with Cal Poly. We developed a trap we could use, a protocol system we used. We went into MPAs inside and out. We collected data. We tagged fish. We found out how fast they grow, where they move from, back and forth, whatever. We found a lot of information out. You know, I think the sport boats doing the tagging, that's probably good. You know, I mean, but I think a lot of that fish that live in the near shore, they don't bite a drifting hook. So I think you need to talk to the fishermen again, the commercial guys, maybe the near shore trap guys, or even the guys that use the hooks in the near shore, and let them go in and do some of the research inside these MPAs, just like we did in the beginning. Not so much ROVs and whatever you guys want to put down there, scaring everything out of the way. I don't know. I would think it would just be a better idea to engage the commercial guy to go in there, because the commercial guy knows where these fish live. They've been fishing them for years. Where the MPAs now, we used to fish there too. I mean, so I'm just saying, doom and gloom, I don't see it. All right, thanks.
Thank you very much. Points taken. Appreciate all who have made public comment. We're going to move to any discussion at the council and then consideration of the approval. I want to make clear I'm going to recuse myself on one of these proposed grants, and that is item 8.4, the expansion of the MPA Watch program. That grant proposes to partially fund the Resources Legacy Fund. Resources Legacy Fund, or RLF, generously supports our engagement with the United Nations processes on biodiversity and climate change. And as part of that, they have funded our travel to meetings. So to avoid any concern around conflict of interest or perception of conflict of interest, I will recuse myself from discussion and the vote on 8.4. So I want to just open the floor up to any questions or comments before we consider a motion. And if there are none, yes, Dr. Jackson.
Actually wasn't planning on commenting on this, but in just hearing some of the public comments, had a couple of thoughts that I wanted to echo sentiments around. So one, the value of fishery independent data sources is a critical one that has value both from a monitoring perspective and for stock assessments. And then also, I think that we do as a council need to think holistically moving forward, like recognizing that political climate and funding has shifted around how we prioritize various sources moving forward. But think a lot of great work has come out of funding the MPA network, and it was actually very impressive to see the stat that said something like from 2017, OPC has contributed $50 million into this network, and I think the decadal review showed a lot of outcome from that.
Yeah, thanks. And I'll just reinforce the point on one, needing to understand what gaps may exist on data, whether it's fisheries data or other scientific data in the ocean as a result of federal funding shifts and cuts. And so I look forward to an update on that at the next meeting. And then two is the need to continue to engage those actively fishing the ocean and our folks from commercial and sport fishing in understanding both the benefits and the impacts from MPAs.
If I may, just in response to the one of the comments that mentioned that maybe fishermen are not involved with CCFRP, that's in fact, you heard from other fishermen saying that's not the case. And I would say of our monitoring groups, CCFRP is an amazing model of working with the resource users, getting them out on the water, helping us to actually publish on spillover effect in ways that we haven't been able to before. So really being able to dig into some of those really interesting questions you can only get through hook and line surveys. And so I think CCFRP is a model, not just for California, but for other MPA networks around the country and the world for how to engage fishermen, how to answer some questions, and how to like really dig into the differences that they're seeing on the water versus what people might be seeing under the water, and complementing all the different research habitat groups that we have been funding. And we will be asking some of these questions as we go into the next MPA monitoring action plan. We'll be convening groups of experts, not just those that have been working with us, really thinking deeply about how we can be cost effective, where we can better spend and where we can be cost effective, but thinking more deeply about some of the bigger stressors that are happening in our MPA network and how to leverage our funds moving forward.
Thank you, very helpful. So I would entertain a motion, if we could, on first on the 4 of the grants, 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, and 8.5.
I'll move to make a motion to adopt projects 8.1 or disperse up to $4,040,000 to advance management of California MPA network through projects 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, and 8.5.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, let's call the roll.
Chair Crowfoot,
Yes.
Katie Landau,
Yes.
Matthew Dumlow,
Yes.
Alexis Jackson,
Yes.
Megan Rocha.
Yes, can you hear me now?
We can.
Yay! Sorry
Thanks.
for my earlier technical difficulties.
No worries. Thank you.
My mic to work.
Thank you so much. Could we entertain a motion on item 8.4?
I will make a motion to approve the disbursement of up to $500,000 to advance management of California's MPA network through project 8.4.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. Can we call the roll?
Katie
Yes.
Matthew Dumlow,
Yes.
Alexis Jackson,
Yes.
Megan Rocha. Sorry, Megan, one more time. Okay, the motion passes.
Thank you so much. Thank you much, Dr. Lewis, and for all of those who provided public comment. We're going to move on to item 9, which is an action item, and it is for the consideration and approval to disperse funds to advance climate-ready fisheries management. And when Katie Sierra, our colleague who is a Sustainable Fisheries and Aquaculture Program Manager. Welcome. Just have to
Not
press.
hearing me?
There you go.
Okay, we hearing me now. Beautiful. Thank you, council members. Thank you, members of the public. My name is Katie Sierra, and today I'm presenting 2 projects to advance climate-ready fisheries management. Slide, please. So as many of us know, throughout the past decade, our coast has experienced an array of unprecedented environmental changes that have impacted our marine ecosystems and fisheries. As we heard earlier today, the Dungeness crab fishery has experienced delayed season openers and early closures due to increased interactions with whales. We know that climate-related changes in whale distributions are one of the factors driving those interactions. We've also seen our ocean salmon fisheries close for 2 consecutive years due to climate-related reductions in salmon populations. Therefore, the dynamic nature of our coastal ecosystem requires management efforts to be proactive, flexible, and responsive. Reliable and timely data is essential for more responsive and adaptive fisheries management in the face of environmental change. The 2018 Marine Life Management Act Master Plan for Fisheries, which guides fisheries research and management efforts by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife and other state partners, highlights the need to modernize catch reporting and data collection systems as a key priority for sustainable fisheries management. Slide, please. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife collects fishery-dependent data through landing receipts and logbooks. Fishermen complete paper logbooks each fishing trips and submit them to the state monthly. These logbooks provide management with critical data on fishing effort, location, discards, and interactions with protected species. 13 paper logbooks are currently in use, but these logbooks are outdated and complex. To date, only 1 electronic logbook is in use, but it needs to be modernized to improve utility for the fishing community and to better align with management objectives. Slide, please. Transitioning to electronic reporting through the development of electronic logbooks will enable near real-time data collection and increase data accessibility. Electronic logbooks will decrease reporting burden on fishermen, improve data accuracy, and decrease processing time. Furthermore, when paired with electronic monitoring systems, such as sensors, location trackers, and onboard cameras, these systems can provide increased data reliability, improved tracking of catches and discards, and additional finer scale spatial information. Slide, please. Today, I will present 2 targeted investments informed and identified in partnership with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife and in alignment with Strategic Goal 3 and 4 of OPC's strategic plan to modernize data collection and advance climate-ready fisheries management over 3 years. Slide, please. These projects will target 4 commercial fisheries: the charter passenger fishing vessel fleet, the market squid fishery, the set gillnet fishery, the Dungeness crab fishery, and recreational fisheries collection through the California Recreational Fisheries Survey. These fisheries differ greatly in their target species, fishing modes, and management objectives, and have been selected due to data volume, feedback from the fishing community, climate vulnerability of target species, and management need for increased spatial and catch information. Slide, please. In this first project, 3 electronic logbook platforms and various electronic monitoring systems will be tested for a subset of vessels across 4 pilot fisheries. This will allow the fishing community and management to optimize and compare features across platforms and systems, establish proof of concept, and allow the California Department of Fish and Wildlife to assess the potential for integrating these technologies into the management framework. After field testing concludes, data and feedback from the fishing community will be synthesized to develop a report on proof of concept as well as next steps for implementation of electronic logbooks and electronic monitoring systems, both fleet-wide and across other California fisheries. Slide, please. This second project will transition the California Recreational Fisheries Survey data entry from paper forms to an electronic platform. This will enable real-time data entry and result in significant data quality improvements. Alongside improvements to the charter passenger fishing vessel electronic logbook, mouthful, this project will decrease the processing time required for California Department of Fish and Wildlife staff to develop monthly catch and effort estimates, and thereby enable more real-time management decisions. Slide, please. I recommend that the council approve these amounts to fund 2 projects to modernize data collection and to advance climate-ready fisheries management in alignment with objectives 3.3 and 4.1 of our strategic plan. Taken together, these 2 investments will increase data accessibility, improve data accuracy, better align data collection with management objectives, and reduce the time needed to record, transmit, and review data. Reliable and rapid data collection is essential for the state to achieve scientific and management objectives in the face of rapidly changing environmental conditions. And as we heard earlier, we definitely need to prioritize data collection for fisheries management. Next slide. Thank you so much. I'm happy to take any questions from council or from the public.
Thank you very much, Katie. Let's move to public comment. I believe we may have someone here from the Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Crowfoot, council members, and OPC staff. My name is Todd Neer. I'm the Environmental Program Manager of CDFW's Marine Region. I'll keep my comments brief, as the department did provide a public comment letter as well. I want to reiterate that the department supports this electronic reporting and electronic monitoring pilot effort in the commercial passenger fishing vessel fleet, market squid, set gillnet, and Dungeness crab fisheries, along with modernizing our data collection in the California Recreational Fisheries Survey. As Katie mentioned, this effort will streamline reporting for fishermen, reduce error rates, improve overall accuracy of our data, and reduce time spent preparing reports required to be submitted to the department. As Katie mentioned, this pilot will inform next steps in the potential for these selected fisheries that will be testing these electronic solutions, along with possibly guiding an expansion effort for those 13 logbooks that she mentioned, as well as 3 other forms that are required to be reported to the department. Additional electronic reporting solutions will expand the department's portfolio and ability to collect near real-time data that is a critical element for climate-ready fisheries management. Additionally, the department is in varied stages of recruiting volunteers for the pilot, as well as participation in in-person workshops that will occur in the lead up to the start of this effort. So thank you again for your time, and I can be here if there's any questions.
Thank you so much for all of the partnership that OPC has with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Hello again, Liz Parasenti, Program Officer with Resources Legacy Fund. We appreciate your consideration of the proposed funding to advance climate-ready fisheries in California. We partnered with OPC staff, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and stakeholders on fisheries management for more than a decade, including working on the 2018 update to the MLMA Master Plan for Fisheries. As was mentioned in the staff presentation, modernizing California's fisheries data collection was one of the primary strategies that emerged from that process. We know that better and more timely data is a foundational step toward adaptive management and for more resilient fisheries and communities. Modernizing data collection not only reduces the time needed to record, transmit, and review data, but it's also an opportunity to take a step back and align data collection with management objectives. We're able to provide philanthropic support for those initial workshops that were just mentioned by my colleague from the department. And so we're really excited about taking that work to inform the next phase of this effort. We really appreciate your consideration of this funding and commend OPC, DFW, and the fishermen's perspective for having the vision to advance and support this and other master plan implementation efforts. Thanks so much. We're excited to partner on this critical work.
Thank you for your engagement, RLF's engagement. Do we have any online public comment?
We do. We have first Anupa Asokan, followed by Ken Frank. Anupa, you have the floor.
Hi, thank you all for your time and effort on this. This is Anupa Asokan. I'm the Executive Director at Fish On. On behalf of our angling and spearfishing communities, I'd just like to express my support for the recommended disbursement of funds to advance climate-ready fisheries management in California. Fishery management is inherently a data-limited effort, and climate change introduces even more risk to our management efforts. So any and all opportunities to enhance our ability to monitor and understand our coastal ecosystems are critically important. I would, if I may, I want to point out a discrepancy or perhaps a lack of clarity in the staff recommendation report regarding the equity and environmental justice benefits. I respectfully ask that this be addressed and corrected as these and future projects move forward. The report appears to conflate fishing communities broadly with marginalized communities. I believe this undermines the intent of environmental justice and equity initiatives, and I'm afraid it will erode the opportunity to support those truly marginalized, in this case, those marginalized within the fishing community itself, such as communities of color, low-income subsistence fishing communities, and tribal fishing communities. I also want to affirm that commercial industries, including commercial fishermen, are not categorically environmental justice communities. As a leading voice on environmental justice issues in fishery management, we at Fish On are happy to be a resource on this issue if there are further questions or clarity needed on language. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
So we have Ken Frank followed by Chris Voss. Ken, you have the floor.
We are not yet able to hear anything.
Sorry, we can come back to Ken. Next we'll go to Chris Voss. Chris, you have the floor.
Thank you, Secretary Crowfoot and commissioners or councilmen. I just want to support this action item because these are the kind of things, these efficiencies that are associated with this, and the thoughtful aspects of implementing it in a phased fashion, I think are all very intelligent approaches to work with technology and better, more efficient ways to collect meaningful information. And so I feel like maybe a couple of agenda item 8's funding choices could have been included in this category, and then there wouldn't be this 4.5 million spent essentially on MPA evaluation versus a 2.4 million investment in resilient fisheries management. So I just am commenting on the optics of that versus this I believe is a good investment, and maybe it could have been done. The past agenda item could have been done in a way that that emphasized some of the later comments after mine that recognize the value of what agenda item made its investments doing on behalf of fisheries. Thank you for this opportunity to comment.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Going back to Ken Frank. Ken, you have the floor.
Yes, can you hear me now?
We can.
All right, Secretary Crowfoot, council members, my name is Ken Franke. I'm president of the Sport Fishing Association of California. SAC is a regional organization representing most commercial passenger fishing vessels on the South Coast. We're in support of this agenda item as this is the next step in the approved progression of electronic data reporting. The effort to upgrade this system is timely and a necessity. We believe that the speed with which this fisheries data will now be reported and processed will assist in efficient management of our sport fishing resources. We thank Todd Nair and the department for their comprehensive work on this project, and we look forward to test and install the new systems. We have worked for many years with CDFW to implement an electronic logbook system. The product of this partnership has been the transition of most of our fleet to electronic reporting. Importantly, there has been a reduction in paper reporting and the regulatory impact this may represent, a plus for all involved. It is important I mention that since eLog inception in the SAC fleet over 5 years ago, we have had our SAC staff working hand in hand with the department. We additionally hired at our expense a captain from the fleet to go boat to boat to help conduct training and to set up the logs. We are ready to support this new endeavor as necessary. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. There are no other public commenters.
Well, thanks everybody for the public comment and for bringing this item forward. I will recuse myself from the discussion and the vote on this item, but I am glad to facilitate any comments that any council members have. Or seeing, oh, yeah, Dr. Jackson.
Yeah, I actually have a few questions and thoughts on this item. So I think we've all been made aware in Katie's comments about the tremendous impacts that fisheries have faced because of climate-induced impacts. And even at this meeting today, we've had continuous conversations about the lack of usable high-quality data. I'm a really big proponent of experimentation when it's necessary versus taking opportunities to move swiftly to scale. And so I'm just wondering, as we look at kind of the fisheries that were chosen and the approach, why are we only working with 4 when we have 13 that we need to transition, recognizing that electronic logbooks are not a new conversation in the state, certainly not in the US. We know that a number of coastal states have had electronic logbooks for quite some time. So wondering how California is different and what we specifically need to experiment on here versus using the resources to move towards more broader implementation or finding ways to look at kind of interoperability of one logbook system. I'm not quite understanding why we're still taking an iterative step, just recognizing the size of the challenge ahead of us.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Jackson. So first, I just wanted to broadly say that today's investment in climate-ready fisheries is certainly not the last one we plan to make moving forward. There are certainly other data modernization steps for California, and there is certainly a wide range of other ecological and socioeconomic investments that OPC is pursuing. I also just want to briefly address the comments about DEI and equity. I apologize if anything in the staff recommendation was offensive. I do want to point out that these projects benefit not only commercial fisheries, but also recreational fishing communities, many of which have been impacted and are marginalized. So moving on to your comments, Councilmember Jackson. So these projects have been identified in close collaboration with Todd's department at the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. These target fisheries were identified because we received feedback from both the fishing community and from the Department of Fish and Wildlife that these were the most ready to accept these technologies and the greatest need existed in these fisheries. And I would also say that this is not the last step that we will take in implementing these technologies. This is in order to assess and test with the fishing community and with the Department of Fish and Wildlife to assess how these technologies will be implemented. And I certainly defer to my colleagues at the department if they'd like to offer any further comment.
We have conducted several logbook reviews over the last 10 to 15 years with our partners and consultants. The last review was completed in 2023 that identified these 4 fisheries as being priorities. We are experimenting with different solutions here. In the set gillnet fishery, that they just completed a bycatch analysis that has identified the need for electronic monitoring and reporting. So we will be testing that. In the Dungeness crab fishery, they currently have biweekly reporting, and we're going to evaluate if they need to move towards a logbook that can incorporate and integrate electronic monitoring. The other fisheries are just going to be electronic reporting. They do not have a vessel monitoring or vessel logging need right now. This pilot will help guide future rulemaking and the potential for consolidation. We have many questions: who, what, when, where, why, and how. There's many similarities among these logbooks, so this will help guide a larger rulemaking which will be required to implement because we currently, the regulations specify specific paper form numbers. So this is a pilot to guide future efforts in that proof of concept that Katie mentioned.
Thank you for that. And recognize that a lot of thought has been put into this, and don't mean to discount that, but also acknowledging the conversation has been long at the state level, and also pilots have been done in the past. So having assurances that Pilots will actually generate the kind of on-the-water change and data reporting in a timely fashion, I think is what's top of mind.
Thank you very much. Seeing no other comments or questions, I would entertain a motion on this item.
I'll make the motion. I move that we adopt the findings as described in the staff report and approve the disbursement of up to $2.4 million to Resources Legacy Fund to administer and support 2 projects regarding data collection and modernization.
So moved.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Katie Landau,
Yes.
Matthew Dumlau,
Yes.
Alexis Jackson,
Yes.
Megan Rocha.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you so much. I need to depart, but I'm turning over the tail end of the meeting here to my colleague, Katie Landau.
Thank you. And with that, we're going to move to our consent items. So just for awareness, we don't plan to have a presentation, but we do have staff available if there are any questions. So the first consent item is number 10, which is a request for approval to augment funding for an existing science advisory grant to the Ocean Science Trust. This funding is intended to support 2 separate working groups to, 1, develop scientific guidance to inform successful coastal and marine restoration, given a changing climate, and 2, inform a framework for integrating human uses in future MPA monitoring. And item 11 is a request to augment funding for an existing agreement with the Southern California Coastal Water Research Project, which has supported critical water quality monitoring following the Los Angeles fires. So with that, I would just ask if any council member wants to remove these items from consent and bring them forward for discussion, we can do that.
Can we bring forward item number 10?
Of course. So with that, I will open up discussion on item 10. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Just quickly wanted to ask, I thought that a really thoughtful approach was taken as we looked over the report card process to working group inclusion with the principle about diversifying the expertise that's on these working groups. And so I'm wondering, given the pretty massive implications of the outcomes and recommendations from the restoration working group, if there's opportunities to expand participation to include more restoration practitioners, or to get a sense of even the current working group, what the composition is like?
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Jackson. That's a great point. The working group that we have right now was kind of initially spun up as kind of a rapid response team almost to help us with some short-term policy needs. And as that effort progressed, we kind of refocused on the science needs. I think the scope has expanded significantly, and right now the 4 people that we have on the group represent intertidal ecology, kelp forest ecology, and estuarine ecology. So we've kind of covered some good bases in terms of academics who have experience with those priority habitats for restoration. But your point is well taken. Well, first of all, a gap we're already trying to fill is tribal perspectives, and so we're looking to find scientists who may be affiliated with tribes or tribal governments who have kind of one foot in the Western science world, but also one foot in the traditional knowledge world and can bring both of those perspectives to bear on this group. That's something, quite frankly, that was lacking in some of the, like for example, our 30 by 30 advisory panel. We did not have that, and we heard that criticism from tribes and really have taken it to heart. So we will be filling that gap for sure. I think your other point, or your kind of broader point about restoration practice is important, and so we can definitely expand this group to include additional academics, to include restoration practitioners. You know, I don't see any reason why we could not work with our colleagues at OST to identify a few other people that would kind of help, expand this group and bring more of a diversity of perspectives. I will also say that we have, it's not really a formal working group, but agency colleagues who work with the different departments and boards and commissions that are actually conducting restoration, who have been working closely with us on the policy piece, and we're planning to connect those two groups as well. So in addition to kind of the on the ground, the more scientific practitioners, we do have a pathway already to bring the agency practitioners into the discussion.
Thank you.
Of course.
Looking to see if there's any other comment. Okay, if with that, I would ask for a motion on item 10.
All right, I will make that motion. Let me just find it. I move that we approve the recommendation in the staff report for item number 10 and adopt the resolutions identified in the staff report.
I'll second.
Thank you, Sarah.
Before we move on with the roll call vote, I'm so sorry, Alexis, I believe you sit on the board of the Ocean Science Trust and may need to recuse from item 10.
Oh, valid point. Thank you, Kaitlyn.
So I would be looking then for another second.
I can second.
Thank you. And with that, I will ask Sarah to take roll, please.
Katie Landau,
Yes?
Matthew Dumlau,
Yes.
Megan Rocha. The motion passes.
Thank you. And then going back to item 11, I will again ask if any council member wants to remove this item from consent and bring forward. If not, seeing no request, I will ask Sarah to take the roll call for item 11, please.
Katie Landau,
Yes?
Matthew Dumlau,
Yes.
Alexis Jackson,
Yes.
Megan Rocha.
Yes.
The motion.
Thank you. And with that, we will then move on to item 12, which is an opportunity for members of the public to speak on any non-agenda items. So first, I will look to speakers in the room. Please come up.
Good afternoon, council members and staff. I'm Megan Cleveland with the Nature Conservancy. While I recognize that item 10 was on consent, just here to express TNC's support for the item, particularly the continued support for the Restoration Working Group, and just express TNC's appreciation for OPC's leadership to advance habitat restoration efforts in the marine space. A key priority for TNC is increasing the pace and scale of protection and restoration of California's nearshore habitats, including kelp, native oysters, and eelgrass, to address the climate and biodiversity crises. To continue to advance the efforts to protect and restore these critical habitats, we recommend setting ambitious acre-based targets and leveraging the significant investments provided in Prop 4 to support the conservation, protection, and restoration of marine wildlife and healthy ocean and coastal ecosystems. We look forward to learning more about the Restoration Working Group's priorities, timeline, and goals and objectives, and how these efforts can support the development of statewide targets. As the Ocean Science Trust continues to support this working group, TNC would like to provide 3 recommendations. First, along the lines of Councilmember Jackson's question, we recommend that OPC and OST expand the working group to include additional science-based restoration practitioners that have decades of experience in applied restoration. Second, that specific restoration targets are set for kelp, native oysters, and eelgrass. And then finally, that the development of restoration targets include a science-based, transparent process that draws on similar efforts from within and outside of California, and that the development of these targets incorporate the best available science. Thank you so much for the opportunity to provide comment, and we look forward to continuing to work with OPC and OST on this effort.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Marie Blackard, and I am a student at UC Davis and an ocean conservation intern with Environment California.
I'd first like to thank you all for your current and past work on marine conservation. As a child, I grew up visiting California's coast at least once every summer. I loved playing in the sand, splashing in the water, finding critters in tide pools. And these fond memories that I have motivate me to advocate for a healthy ocean for future generations to enjoy. Generally, I'd like to voice my support for the strengthening of marine protected areas in California. They are one effective way to support long-term well-being of California's ocean and coastal resources, and especially with the goal of conserving 30% of state lands and coastal waters by 2030, strengthening our MPA network is crucial. And with your leadership, we can preserve California's marine resources for future generations to grow to cherish as much as we do right now. Thank you.
Thank you. And not seeing any other speakers in the room, I will open it to virtual comment.
First, we have Walter Lamb, followed by Zoe Collins. Walter, you have the floor.
Thank you, and good afternoon, council members and staff. I'm Walter Lamb with the Bina Wetlands Land Trust. Today's meeting demonstrated that the state of California remains fully committed to addressing the impacts of climate change and to promoting diversity and environmental justice, even as the new federal government has launched an aggressive assault against these important efforts. One area that seems to have fallen through the cracks, however, is the apparent lack of any guidance from the state to help local agencies and environmental nonprofit groups that receive federal funding and that are now under intense pressure to abandon climate and diversity initiatives in order to avoid any disruption to that federal funding. This is happening right now here in the Los Angeles area, where a nonprofit called the Bay Foundation, which staffs the Santa Monica Bay National Estuary Program, has already deleted references to climate change, equity, and disadvantaged communities from a draft work plan that will be considered for approval by the Santa Monica Bay Restoration Commission in April. These changes are in response to recent executive orders from the Trump administration, and if they're finalized, it would cause irreparable damage, not just to local conservation efforts, but efforts across the state and beyond. Funding, as today's meeting shows, funding is important to accomplish, good missions. When the funding sort of takes precedent over the mission and you start, throwing the mission overboard to get the funding, that creates a real problem. And I think we've heard a lot about environmental justice and equity at today's meeting. And I think the worst thing that you can do at this point, or that anyone can do, is to walk away or retreat from that at the first sign, that there might be a funding impact. So I'm hoping that someone in the Ocean Protection Council or elsewhere within the Natural Resources Agency can point to some available resources that local agencies and nonprofits can use to navigate this difficult environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have Zoe Collins, followed by caller ending in 5936. Zoe, you have the floor.
Good afternoon again, council members and Secretary Crowfoot. This is Zoe Collins again, speaking on behalf of Heal the Bay. I'd like to start by expressing our deepest gratitude to the council and staff for the funding disbursement mentioned in agenda item 11. The recent LA wildfires have been nothing but devastating for our community, and the atmosphere around our city has been tense and surreal. Heal the Bay's team of water quality scientists immediately jumped into action following the fires to collect much needed samples to better understand the impact of the wildfires on our local water quality. Myself and our entire team were completely stunned by the amount of grief and loss that is tangible in these neighborhoods. We've joined efforts with SCORP, or the Southern California Coastal Water Research Project, and can say firsthand how valuable this funding will be for the coordination of post-wildfire monitoring all across LA County. We strongly support this funding disbursement and would like to go so far as to request even more funding dollars to go toward not only coordination efforts, but the monitoring efforts themselves. These water quality tests take a tremendous amount of resources, and as of right now, groups like Heal the Bay are fronting much of these costs ourselves. So thank you very much for the chance to comment, and again for the funding disbursement.
Next, we have caller ending in 5936, followed by Melissa Mahoney. Caller 59, oh, you have the floor.
Thank you. Eileen Boken, Coalition for San Francisco Neighborhoods, speaking on my own behalf. reiterating comments from the State Lands Commission meeting of February 25th of this year regarding the sand mining leases in San Francisco Bay, which are up for renewal. The Bay Conservation and Development Commission, or BCDC, is in the final process of reviewing the environmental effects of sand mining. As part of this review, I have strongly urged BCDC to include a cost-benefit analysis. I would strongly urge the State Lands Commission to conduct its own cost-benefit analysis. The U.S. Geological Survey released a study which concluded that sand mining in San Francisco Bay was affecting sediment transport in coastal areas south of the Golden Gate. San Francisco's Ocean Beach has experienced erosion and accretion. In the city of Pacifica, the erosion of coastal bluffs is so severe that homes are literally collapsing into the Pacific Ocean. Pacifica is estimated that managed retreat to deal with this erosion would cost $1 billion with a B. It would appear that the environmental cost of sand mining in San Francisco Bay far exceed the benefits. Thank you.
Melissa Mahoney, followed by Keith Rosart. Melissa, you have the floor.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Good afternoon, council members and staff. My name is Melissa Mahoney, and I'm the executive director of the Monterey Bay Fisheries Trust. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. We're dedicated to increasing community access to healthy, local, and sustainably caught seafood while also preserving the economy, our heritage, and the biodiversity of Monterey Bay. We work in partnership with fishermen, seafood businesses, local government leaders, and other organizations to find a balance between how we can have a healthy ocean ecosystem and a thriving seafood economy. And over the last few months, I've had the good fortune to be in conversations with OPC staffer Katie Sierri, and she's been helping me explore how our work can better align with OPC's goal number 4 of a sustainable blue economy, and especially with respect to objective 4.1.2, which are pilot projects to increase fishing communities' resiliency. And to that end, and together with other regional partners, the Monterey Bay Fisheries Trust is preparing to launch an ambitious new initiative that we're calling Future of Blue. This is a 2-year community-based process that's designed to unlock our potential here in the Monterey Bay for our ecosystem and communities, and to create a resilient, innovative blue economy by 2030. So just briefly, our initiative is unfolding now with a data gathering and feasibility study. This is going to result in a fisheries trends report that will be publicly available. That will inform a second process, which is convenings to develop a shared vision and an investment plan and a 5-year roadmap. And I wanted to just bring this to your attention and thank you for the time and the opportunity to work with place-based communities and groups like ours to ensure a healthy future for our coastal economy. So you'll hopefully hear more about this soon, but I wanted to give a quick update now. Thank you very much.
Next and final caller is Keith Rootsart. Keith, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. My name is Keith Rootsart with the Giant Kelp Restoration Project. And when I was a kid in school, like 50 years ago, we learned to crawl under our desks and cover our heads when we see the flash of a nuclear bomb. I thought the Cold War was over, but after what I saw on TV Thursday in the Oval Office, I think we are now the bad guys. I will not change sides. I will not abide. I won't be a victim of our dysfunctional government. We had a great kelp restoration project going in Monterey with 252 certified kelp restoration divers, removing 750,000 urchins and 1,527 safe dives. We grew 11 acres of kelp in a former urchin barren. But despite our wishes, the Ocean Protection Council, Department of Fish and Wildlife, and Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary wrote a letter to the Fish and Game Commission to sunset our regulation amendment for the sake of control. We stopped work in our stolen kelp forest for a year while we shot YouTube video of the urchins eating up our kelp. The Kelp Restoration Management Plan is slow walking into 2027, while NOAA funding for kelp work is vulnerable. But we are not waiting around for misinformed bad ideas to control our destiny. This spring, we will steal our kelp forest back and grow 92 acres of kelp. We will work within existing regulations outside MPAs to remove urchins with improved methods, accelerate urchin ranching and composting, and build ocean stewardship in a blue economy with hundreds of concerned Californians. We are taking the power back. Thanks.
Thank you. There are no more online public commenters.
Great. Thank you to everyone who provided public comment. The next item is the arrangements, is number 13, arrangements for the next meeting and the adjournment. So our next council meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, June 10th from 1 to 5 p.m. here in the CNRA auditorium. And there will also be Zoom participation available. So the additional dates for 2025 are also posted on the OPC webpage. And if you're looking at your calendars that far out, that would be September 30th and December 9th. And with that, that concludes today's meeting. So thank you to everyone who participated today, and the council is now adjourned.